Lost knowledge of the ancient world. Imagine a time long, long ago, when the world was full of secrets. What if people knew things then that we have totally forgotten today? What if amazing inventions and powerful ideas simply vanished into thin air? This is a story about such a secret, hidden for centuries. It begins with a young girl named Alara. She lived in a small, dusty village at the edge of a great desert. The desert was like a sleeping giant, stretching out forever under a sky that burned bright blue every day. Alara was not like other kids her age. While they played with carved wooden toys, Alara often explored the edges of the village, looking for shiny rocks or interesting bones. She had bright, curious eyes that missed nothing. Her hair was the color of sand, and it always seemed to have little bits of dust caught in it from her adventures. One blistering hot afternoon, the kind where the air shimmered above the ground, Alara was doing just that. She was poking around a pile of old, crumbling stones, which everyone in the village just called the ruins. Nobody remembered who built them or why. They were just part of the landscape. As she dug her fingers into the loose sand near a particularly large, flat stone, she felt something hard and smooth. It wasn't a rock. It wasn't a bone. It was something else entirely. She brushed away the sand carefully. What she found made her heart thump like a drum. It was a small, round disc, the size of her palm. It looked like polished black stone, but it felt warm, almost alive, in her hands. Swirls and strange symbols were carved into its surface, not like any writing she had ever seen. They seemed to glow faintly, a deep, soft blue, especially when she tilted it just right in the sunlight. This was not just any old thing. This was special. Alara kept her discovery a secret. She knew the village elders would just tell her it was a useless old thing, maybe even say it was bad luck. But Alara felt a pull, a strange connection to the smooth black disc. She hid it under her sleeping mat, pulling it out only at night when everyone else was asleep. By the light of the moon peeking through the cracks in her mud hut, she would trace the strange symbols with her finger. Sometimes, she thought she could hear a faint hum coming from it, like a sleepy bee. Days turned into weeks. Alara studied the disc every chance she got. She started seeing shapes in the desert that reminded her of the symbols. A spiral in a shell, the curve of a bird's wing. It was as if the disc was teaching her to see the world differently. One night, as she traced a symbol that looked like a star with many points, the disc suddenly grew brighter. The blue glow became strong, pulsing gently. A tiny, almost silent click came from its center. Then, a small, thin beam of light shot out from the disc, hitting the opposite wall of her hut. The light wasn't just a simple beam. It showed images. First, it was blurry, like looking through water. Then, it sharpened. Alara gasped. It showed a map, but not a map of her village. This was a map of a huge city, grand and shining, full of tall buildings that touched the clouds. Rivers flowed through it, and strange, flying machines zipped across the sky. People in flowing robes walked through lush gardens. It was beautiful, impossible. The image shifted. Now, it showed people in a large room, working with tools Alara had never seen. They wore headbands that glowed softly. They were building something intricate, something made of light itself. Their faces were kind, intelligent. They seemed to be solving problems, creating wonders. This was the lost knowledge, Alara suddenly understood. This was a glimpse into a time when humans knew so much more. The images flickered, then faded. The disc returned to its soft glow. Alara lay awake for a long time, her mind buzzing. This wasn't just an old rock. It was a window to another world, another time. She knew, deep in her gut, that she had to learn more. She had to find out what happened to these amazing people and their knowledge. Her first thought was to talk to old man Tarek. He was the oldest person in the village, with a long white beard and eyes that had seen many seasons. He sat by the communal fire most evenings, telling stories of ancient heroes and forgotten lands. Alara had always loved his tales, but she had never fully believed them. Now, she wondered. The next evening, Alara found Tarek sitting by the dying embers of the fire, chewing on a piece of dried fruit. She sat down quietly beside him. "Tarek," she began, her voice a little shaky, "do you remember stories about people who knew amazing things? Like, really amazing things, beyond what we can imagine?" Tarek's eyes, usually half closed, opened fully. He looked at her with a knowing gaze. "Ah, little Alara," he rumbled, "you speak of the ancients, the high ones. My grandmother's grandmother spoke of them. They built cities of light, they say. They understood the stars and the very breath of the earth." He paused, taking a long sip of water. "But their knowledge was lost, swallowed by the desert, they say. Or maybe, hidden away for a time when new eyes could find it again." Ilara's heart pounded. He knew, or at least, he knew the stories. "Did they leave anything behind?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Tarek shrugged. Legends speak of sunstone temples and whispering wells, places where their wisdom was kept, but no one has seen them in ages. The desert moves, little one. It covers and uncovers secrets as it pleases. Ilara didn't tell Tarek about the disc. Not yet. She felt it was her secret to protect, but his words gave her hope and a direction. Sunstone temples, whispering wells. She had to find them. The next few days, Ilara spent her time tracing the strange symbols on the disc again. This time, she paid closer attention to the shapes that looked like maps. She noticed one symbol that looked like a mountain with a jagged peak, and another that looked like a winding river. She compared these to the familiar shapes of her own desert surroundings, the dunes, the far-off mountains she sometimes saw on the horizon. One morning, she packed a small bag with water, some dried dates, and a worn blanket. She knew her parents would worry, but she had to go. She told them she was going to look for rare desert flowers, a common excuse for her wanderings. With the black disc tucked safely inside her tunic, she set off towards the distant mountains, the ones that matched the symbol on her magical device. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the sand into shimmering waves. Each step was a struggle, her small feet sinking into the soft ground. As she walked, she kept pulling out the disc, letting its faint blue glow guide her. It was like a compass. The light would grow stronger when she was facing the right direction, and dim when she turned away. It was slow going, much slower than she expected. The mountains that looked so close from the village were actually days away. She slept under the vast, star-filled sky, using her blanket as a shield against the chilly night winds. The desert felt huge and empty, but the disc in her hand felt like a warm, comforting friend. On the third day, just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, Ilara saw something new. Not a mountain peak, but a cluster of strangely shaped rock. They weren't smooth and wind-worn like the others. These had sharp angles, almost as if they had been cut. As she got closer, she realized they weren't just rock. They were broken pieces of something much bigger, something built by hands. This was it, a ruin, much grander than the one near her village. She saw remnants of walls, huge stones carved with the same swirling symbols that were on her disc. Her heart leaped with excitement. This was a sunstone temple, or what was left of one. She spent the next few hours exploring the crumbling structure, the disc clutched tightly in her hand. The symbols on the walls pulsed faintly in response to the disc, as if talking to each other. It was almost dark now, the air growing cool. She found a doorway, half buried in sand, leading into a dark tunnel. A shiver ran down her spine, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. Taking a deep breath, Ilara used the disc as a light. Its blue glow brightened, pushing back the shadows. The tunnel sloped downwards, deeper and deeper into the earth. The air grew cooler, heavier. The walls were smooth, not rough like natural rock, and covered in more symbols, telling a silent story. She saw drawings of the flying machines she had seen on the projection, and people in glowing headbands. Finally, the tunnel opened into a large chamber. It was circular, with a high ceiling that disappeared into darkness. In the center stood a tall, slender pillar made of the same black, polished stone as her disc. But this pillar was huge, reaching almost to the ceiling. It hummed with a low, steady sound, filling the quiet chamber. And at its very top, a large, glowing crystal pulsed with a soft, golden light. This was the core of the lost knowledge. Ilara felt it in her bones. She slowly approached the pillar, her small disc glowing brighter and brighter in her hand. As she got closer, she noticed a small indentation, a perfect circle, on the side of the pillar, right at her eye level. It was exactly the same size and shape as her disc. With trembling hands, Ilara lifted her disc and gently pressed it into the indentation. It fit perfectly, clicking into place with a soft thud. As it connected, the blue glow from her disc merged with the golden glow of the crystal at the top of the pillar. The humming grew louder, vibrating through the ground. Suddenly, the entire chamber came alive. Lines of light, like intricate spider webs, spread across the walls and ceiling, connecting the symbols. Images began to appear, projected onto the very air around her. It was like being inside a giant picture book. She saw the ancient people, the high ones, as Tarek called them. They weren't just building cities. They were talking to plants, making barren land bloom. They were harnessing energy from the sun itself, not just to light their homes, but to power their amazing flying machines and create incredible tools. She saw them studying the stars, not just looking at them, but understanding their movements, predicting events far into the future. They built great observatories, not with telescopes, but with a deeper connection to the cosmos. They learned how to make water appear in the desert and how to heal sickness with gentle, glowing touch, not just with medicines. Their knowledge was so vast, so peaceful, so connected to the earth and the sky. But then, the images shifted. The calm faces of the high ones started to look worried. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon in the projections. She saw flashes of light, not from their peaceful technology, but from explosions. There were other people, fierce and angry, with sharp weapons, attacking the beautiful cities. These attackers seemed to want the High Ones' power, but not their wisdom. They wanted to control, not to understand. The High Ones, Alara saw, didn't fight back with violence. Instead, they worked together, sadly. They gathered their most precious knowledge, their most powerful tools, and began to hide them. They built secret vaults, deep underground, protected by puzzles and guardians. They left behind clues, like the symbols on Alara's disc, hoping that someday, someone worthy would find them. They understood that their wisdom was too precious to be lost forever, but also too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. They chose to preserve it, rather than let it be twisted and misused. The images showed the High Ones scattering, going to different parts of the world, carrying small pieces of their knowledge with them, like seeds. Some went into the mountains, some across the seas, and some, like the ones who built this temple, stayed in the desert, hoping to protect a central store of their wisdom. They made a promise, to return, or for their knowledge to be found, when the world was ready again. The projections faded, leaving Alara alone in the softly glowing chamber. The humming of the pillar quieted. She carefully removed her disc. The large crystal at the top of the pillar still glowed, but it felt different. Not just a source of light, but a keeper of memory. Alara understood now. Her disc was more than just a key. It was a fragment of the ancient world, a piece of their vast knowledge, meant to guide someone to this very spot. She felt a huge responsibility settle on her small shoulders. This wasn't just a story now, it was real. This lost knowledge, if used wisely, could change her world, solve problems like hunger and thirst, and bring peace. But if it fell into the wrong hands, the same terrible things could happen again. She knew she couldn't just go back to her village and tell everyone. They wouldn't understand. Some might be afraid, others might try to take the knowledge for themselves, just like the angry people in the projections. She needed time to think, to learn more. Before leaving the chamber, Alara looked around again. She noticed a faint outline on the smooth floor, near the pillar. It was a symbol she recognized from her disc, but it was much bigger, glowing faintly. She stepped onto it. As she did, a small, hidden compartment in the pillar slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, nestled on a velvet cushion, was another object. It was a small, delicate book, bound in what looked like thin, polished metal. Its pages were not paper, but thin, flexible sheets of a shimmering material, covered in the same glowing symbols. This was a book of the High Ones, an actual text from their time. Alara gently picked it up. It felt light, almost weightless. She knew this was the next step. She had to learn to read these symbols, to understand the wisdom directly from the High Ones themselves. This was not a quick task. This would take years. With the book carefully tucked into her bag, and her disc returned to her tunic, Alara began the long journey back home. The desert seemed different now. Not just a vast, empty space, but a silent guardian of secrets. She felt changed. No longer just a curious village girl, but a keeper of lost knowledge, a bridge between two worlds. She returned to her village, tired but filled with a new purpose. She told her parents a story about finding a rare desert flower that bloomed only at night, explaining her long absence. They were relieved to have her back and didn't press for too many details. Alara returned to her usual life, but her nights were now different. Under the cover of darkness, Alara would take out the book and her disc. She slowly, painstakingly, began to decipher the symbols. The disc helped, lighting up certain words, making them feel more familiar. It was like learning a new language, but one that felt deeply familiar, almost like remembering something she already knew. She learned about energy, about the patterns of the earth, about healing herbs, about the power of thought itself. She started small, testing out simple ideas. She learned how to make a small plant grow faster with a gentle touch and focused intention. She learned how to find water beneath the driest rock using the disc's subtle guidance. She didn't show off, she didn't boast. She applied her new knowledge in secret, making small improvements to her family's crops, finding clearer water sources for the village well. She was a quiet helper, her actions seeming like small miracles to the villagers who didn't know her secret. One day, a terrible sandstorm hit the village, fiercer than any in memory. Houses were damaged, and the village well, their only source of water, was buried under tons of sand. Panic spread. People thought they would have to leave their homes, that their village was doomed. Alara knew this was her chance to help. Carefully, she took her disc and the book. She went to Old Man Tarek, not with the disc, but with a deep, calm look in her eyes. "Tarek," she said, her voice steady, "the High Ones knew how to find water. They knew how to make things grow even in the harshest lands. I think I know how to find our well, and maybe even a new, clearer source of water." Tarek looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw not just a girl, but something ancient and wise in her gaze. "How is child?" he asked, his voice full of hope, but also doubt. "I found something," she said, simply, "something that showed me their ways. If you trust me, I can try." Tarek thought for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We have no other choice," he said. "Show us, Ilara." Ilara led the villagers to the buried well. She didn't reveal the disc openly, but she held it close to her body, letting its subtle vibrations guide her. She told the villagers where to dig, not just randomly, but with precision, following the faint signals she felt from the disc. To their amazement, they quickly uncovered the well. But the water was muddy, still contaminated by the storm. "There's more," Ilara declared, pointing towards a barren stretch of desert far beyond the village, a place they had never thought to look for water. The High Ones knew the patterns of the earth. "There's a river, deep underground, much clearer than this one. It flows there." Many villagers were skeptical. "That's impossible, Ilara. We've dug there for generations, nothing but dry sand," one man exclaimed. But Tarek, remembering his own stories, stepped forward. "Ilara has a gift," he said, surprising everyone. "Let us follow her guidance. She speaks of ancient wisdom." With Tarek's support, the villagers began to dig where Ilara directed, her disc quietly guiding her, its symbols telling her exactly where the water flowed. It was hard work, but after hours, they hit it. A gush of cool, clear water erupted from the earth, clean and fresh, unlike anything they had tasted before. Cheers erupted. The village was saved. From that day on, Ilara became their quiet leader, their source of wisdom. She didn't become a queen or a ruler, but a guardian of knowledge. She never revealed the full power of the disc or the book to everyone, knowing that some secrets were too profound for a world not yet ready. But she used the lost knowledge to help her people thrive. She taught them how to rotate crops more effectively, how to build stronger homes that withstood sandstorms, and how to live in greater harmony with their harsh environment. Years passed. Ilara grew older, her hair turning silver like the desert moonlight. She taught a few trusted apprentices, carefully chosen for their kind hearts and keen minds, the secrets of the ancient symbols and the wisdom of the High Ones. She passed on the disc and the book, ensuring that the lost knowledge would never truly be lost again. She understood that knowledge was not meant to be hoarded, but to be shared responsibly, like a seed planted in fertile ground, growing slowly, gently, until it could benefit everyone. The desert village, once struggling, became a beacon of life, an oasis of wisdom. They didn't build flying machines or cities of light, not yet, but they learned to live better, to be kinder, to understand their world more deeply. And it all started with a small, curious girl and a glowing black disc, a hidden piece of the lost knowledge of the ancient world, waiting patiently for someone to find it again. Mysteries of the Titanic disaster. Imagine a ship, bigger and grander than any other, slicing through the dark, icy ocean. People called it unsinkable, a floating palace designed to laugh at the wave. But on one cold night, a terrible secret began to unfold, a mystery hidden deep beneath the waves that still whispers to us today. It was April 1912. The Titanic was on its very first trip, from England to America. Thousands of people were on board. Rich folks wore fancy clothes and ate amazing meals. Poor folks hoped for a new, better life. Everyone felt excited. The ship was like a giant city moving across the water. It had swimming pools, gyms, and beautiful rooms. Nobody thought anything bad could ever happen to such a magnificent ship. One of the crew members was a young man named Tommy. He was a steward, which meant he helped people in their rooms. Tommy was only 18. With bright blue eyes and hair the color of sand. He loved working on the Titanic. Every day felt like an adventure. He saw famous people and heard exciting stories. Tommy dreamed of saving enough money to open his own little shop back home. On the night of April 14th, Tommy was busy. He helped a lady find her lost gloves. He brought warm milk to a nervous old man. The ship felt smooth, almost like it wasn't moving at all. Outside, the night was clear and very cold. The stars sparkled like tiny diamonds. But something was wrong. The air felt too still, too quiet. It was the kind of quiet that makes your hairs stand up. Suddenly, a strange feeling went through the ship. It wasn't a big bang, not at first. It was more like a long, deep scrape, a shiver that went from the bottom of the ship all the way to the top. Tommy was in a hallway, carrying fresh towels. The scrape felt like a giant fingernail dragging across a blackboard. It lasted for many seconds. People stopped talking. Their faces looked puzzled. Then, a low rumble started. It wasn't loud, but it grew. It was the sound of something breaking. Tommy felt his stomach drop. He looked at the passengers. Some looked worried, some looked annoyed. "What was that?" a woman asked, her voice a little shaky. Tommy didn't know. No one did. The ship kept moving, but it felt different. It felt heavy. Minutes later, a whistle blew. It was a sharp, urgent sound. Crew members started moving faster, their faces serious. Life vests, someone yelled. Life vests? For an unsinkable ship? It made no sense. Tommy felt a cold dread spread through him. He had seen the lifeboats. There weren't enough for everyone. He knew that. Everyone knew that. Tommy rushed to his assigned station. His job was to help passengers get to the lifeboats. He tried to be calm, to smile, but his hands shook. He saw a mother holding her baby tight. He saw a father trying to comfort his little girl. The ship's band started playing happy music. It was a strange sound. Happy music as the world seemed to tilt. The deck was starting to slope just a tiny bit, but it was there. The mystery began even before the ship hit the iceberg. The lookouts, the men whose job it was to watch for danger, had no binoculars. Binoculars help you see far away things. They were left behind in England. How could such an important ship forget something so vital? It was a huge mistake. A mystery of carelessness. Without them, the lookouts saw the iceberg too late. Much too late. Even more strange, the warnings about icebergs had been coming in all day. Other ships had sent messages saying, "Beware, lots of ice." But somehow, these messages didn't reach the captain's bridge, where the ship was steered. Or if they did, they weren't taken seriously enough. One message was even put under a stack of papers and forgotten. How could such important news be lost? It was a mystery of bad luck and worse communication. Tommy helped an old couple into a lifeboat. The boat looked small and fragile against the giant side of the Titanic. He saw the fear in their eyes. He wished he could tell them everything would be okay, but he couldn't. He knew the truth. The ship was sinking. The tilt was growing. Water was rushing into the lowest parts of the ship. Then there was the strange story of the mystery ship. Many people who survived the Titanic disaster later said they saw lights in the distance. They saw another ship. But this ship never came to help. It just watched, or seemed to, and then sailed away. Who was on that ship? Why didn't they help? This is one of the biggest mysteries. Was it a fishing boat? A sealer? No one knows for sure. Some people think it was a ship called the SS Californian, and that its crew made a terrible mistake by not responding. But the captain of the Californian said his ship was stuck in ice, miles away. The mystery ship remains a shadowy figure in the dark night. As the lifeboats filled, a terrible decision was made. Many lifeboats were launched with empty seats. The crew was worried the ropes wouldn't hold if the boats were too full. They didn't realize how strong the boats actually were. So, hundreds of people stayed on the deck, even though there was room for them to be saved. This was a mystery of fear and bad judgment. Tommy saw a lifeboat go down with only 28 people in it, when it could hold 65. His heart ached. The cold was biting now. Tommy could see his breath in the air. The ship's beautiful lights still shone, but they seemed to wink out one by one as the water crept higher. The grand staircase, usually filled with laughter and music, was now a silent, watery tunnel. The band played on, a brave act that still makes people wonder. Why did they keep playing? To calm people? To be heroes? It was a mystery of courage and despair. Tommy helped a little girl named Lily find her mom. Lily was only 6. Her blonde hair was messy, and her eyes were wide with fear. "My teddy bear," she whispered. "It's in our cabin." Tommy knew there was no time. He bent down. "We need to go, Lily," he said softly. "Your mom needs you. Your teddy bear will be waiting for you when we get to America." It was a small lie, but it made her hug her mom a little tighter. Then there was the question of the ship's speed. The Titanic was going very fast. Some say it was trying to beat a record. Others say it was just trying to get to New York on time. Why go so fast through an area known to have iceberg? Was it pride? Was it a rush to show off the ship's power? This is another puzzle. If the ship had gone slower, maybe the lookouts would have seen the iceberg in time. Maybe there would have been enough time to turn the ship. Tommy felt the deck slope more and more. It was getting harder to walk. People were sliding. He saw things tumbling down the deck, chairs, luggage, even a piano from one of the lounges. The water was now reaching the upper deck. He could hear the screams of those who had fallen into the icy ocean. It was a sound that would haunt him forever. The air filled with shouts, cries, and the terrible groaning of the ship as it tore itself apart. He saw the ship's captain, Captain Smith, standing on the bridge. He looked tired, old, and very, very sad. He was going down with his ship, a captain's final duty. Tommy wondered what the captain was thinking. Was he thinking of the warnings he missed, the speed he kept, the lives he couldn't save? It was a mystery of guilt and honor. Another strange thing was the ship's materials. Some people say the steel used to build the Titanic was not strong enough for the very cold water. In extremely cold temperatures, some types of steel can become brittle, like glass. When the iceberg hit, it didn't just dent the ship. It opened up big gashes, like a giant can opener. Was the steel a secret flaw? Did the builders know? This is a mystery studied by smart people even today. Tommy knew he had to try and save himself. He helped the last few passengers get into the final lifeboat. He then ran to the back of the ship, which was now lifting high into the sky. He could see the giant propellers, usually deep underwater, now towering above him. He took a deep breath. He knew it would be freezing. He knew it would be dark. The ship broke in two. It made a horrifying sound, like thunder and ripping metal. The front part sank first, pulled down by the weight of the water. The back part stood up almost straight, pointing to the stars, before it too slid into the black water. Tommy jumped just as the back end began its final dive. The cold was a shock. It was like being hit by 1,000 tiny knives. He fought his way to a piece of floating wood. He saw other people, dozens, hundreds, in the water. He heard their cries, then their silence. The cold water was too much for most. It stole their breath, then their life. Tommy shivered uncontrollably. He hugged the wood tight. He wondered about his family back home. He wondered if he would ever see them again. The hours that followed were a blur of cold, fear, and silent hope. Tommy saw bodies floating past him. He saw pieces of the ship. He saw the emptiness of the vast ocean. He felt alone, small, and utterly helpless. He wondered how anyone could survive such a nightmare. He prayed for the sun to rise, for a ship to appear. Then, just as he thought he couldn't hold on anymore, a ship appeared on the horizon. It was the Carpathia, coming to rescue the survivors. Hope, a tiny spark, ignited in his frozen heart. He waved his arm, but it felt so heavy. He tried to shout, but his voice was a weak croak. Other survivors also started to stir, finding new strength. The rescue was slow and painful. Tommy was pulled aboard the Carpathia. He was wrapped in blankets, given warm soup. His body ached, but he was alive. He looked around at the other survivors. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. They had all seen something terrible. They all carried a piece of the mystery. Even after the survivors were safe, the mysteries kept growing. What about the missing bodies? Thousands of people died, but only a fraction of the bodies were found. The ocean swallowed most of them. Where did they go? Did the currents carry them away? Did sea creatures claim them? It's a somber mystery, leaving many families without a grave to visit. And what about the mummy's curse? This is a very strange story. Some people believed a mummy's coffin was on board the Titanic. They said it was cursed, and that the curse caused the ship to sink. Of course, most people don't believe in curses, but it's a spooky tale that still gets whispered when people talk about the Titanic. It's a fun, scary story, but not really a true explanation. Another mystery, the very last song. The band played to the very end. But what was the last song they played? Some say it was Nearer, My God, to Thee, a famous hymn. Others say it was a cheerful ragtime tune to keep spirits up. No one knows for sure, as all the musicians died. It's a small, sad mystery, a final melody lost to the wave. Years passed. Tommy grew older. He kept his promise to Lily and saw her again, a grown woman. He opened his little shop, just like he had dreamed. But he never forgot that night. He never forgot the cold, the screams, the mysteries. He spoke about it, sharing his story so others would remember. He wanted people to know the truth of what happened, even the parts that still puzzled him. Decades later, people finally found the wreck of the Titanic deep underwater in 1985. It was broken in two, just as survivors like Tommy had said. This solved some mysteries but created new ones. How did the two halves land so far apart? What caused the ship to break in that exact way? Was it the brittle steel? The force of the water? Scientists still study the wreck, hoping to unlock all its secrets. The discovery also brought up new questions about the items found in the wreck. Thousands of objects were scattered on the ocean floor. Shoes, teacups, letters, jewelry. Each item tells a small story, a piece of a life lost. But some things were never found, or found in unexpected places. Why was a safe discovered completely empty? What happened to certain valuable items that were reported to be on board? The ocean is a giant, cold vault, holding its secrets tight. Even today, people visit the Titanic wreck with special submersibles. They see the decaying remains of the ship, covered in rustic lace, which are like rusty icicles. They see the promenade deck where people once strolled. They see the bow, still majestic even in its ruin. The ship is slowly being eaten away by the ocean. It's a race against time to learn all its secrets before it's gone forever. The Titanic disaster changed many rules of the sea. New laws were made for how many lifeboats ships must carry. New rules for radio communication were put in place, so important warnings would never be ignored again. The International Ice Patrol was created to track icebergs. The mysteries of the Titanic, even the ones we can't fully answer, taught us powerful lessons. Tommy lived a long life. He often looked at the sea, remembering the giant ship, the unsinkable dream that sank. He remembered the brave acts, the terrible mistakes, and the many questions that still had no answers. The Titanic was more than just a ship. It was a story, a grand, sad, and deeply mysterious story. A story about human pride, about courage, and about the harsh power of nature. It reminds us that even the biggest and best things can be brought down, and that some mysteries might just stay hidden, deep in the cold, dark ocean, forever whispering their secrets. The echoes of that night, over 100 years ago, still ripple across the waters of time, asking us to remember, to wonder, and to learn. The greatest ship in the world held secrets, and it took them all to the bottom of the sea. The secret strategies of Alexander the Great. Imagine a time, long, long ago, when a young man named Alexander walked the earth. He wasn't just any man. He was like a superhero, leading armies bigger than you can imagine. People say he was the greatest general ever, winning every single battle. But how did he do it? What were his secret powers? His clever tricks that let him conquer the whole world? Our story begins in a dusty, hot land far away. The sun beat down like a hammer. Alexander was just a boy, but he was already smart. His teacher was a very famous thinker named Aristotle. Aristotle taught Alexander many things, about stars, about animals, about how people think. But the most important lessons were about war. Alexander listened carefully, his eyes wide and bright. He learned not just how to fight, but how to think like a winner. One day, a huge, wild horse came to the kingdom. No one could tame it. The horse was black as night, with muscles that rippled like waves. It snorted fire from its nose and kicked with its strong leg. Everyone was scared. They said, "This horse is too wild. No one can ride it." But young Alexander was not scared. He watched the horse closely. He saw something others missed. The horse was scared of its own shadow. Alexander walked slowly, softly, towards the giant horse. He spoke in a gentle voice. He turned the horse so it wouldn't see its shadow. He patted its neck. And then, amazingly, Alexander climbed onto its back. The horse, named Bucephalus, became his best friend. This wasn't just a story about a horse. It taught Alexander a big lesson. Look closely, find the hidden fear, and be kind. This was one of his first secret strategies. Years passed. Alexander grew into a strong, brave man. His father, King Philip, was also a great soldier. Philip taught Alexander how to march armies, how to use spears and shields. But Alexander wanted to do more. He wanted to do things no one had ever done. He dreamed of a world where he was in charge. His eyes always looked to the horizon, to places unknown. Then, sadly, his father died. Alexander became king. He was only 20 years old, just a young man. But he had a fire in his belly. He gathered his army, brave men who trusted him. He told them, "We will go on a grand adventure. We will cross the seas. We will make history." His men cheered. They believed in him. This belief was another one of Alexander's secret weapons. He made his soldiers feel like heroes. His first big challenge was against the mighty Persian Empire. The Persians were huge, rich, and thought they were the best. They had an army that stretched for miles, like a moving city. Their king was Darius, a powerful man with a golden crown. Alexander's army was much smaller. Many people thought Alexander was crazy. "You can't beat Persia," they said. "Their army is too big." But Alexander had a plan. He always had a plan. He didn't just rush into battle. He thought about it. Like a chess master moving pieces, he studied the land. He looked at the enemy. He used his eyes, just like with Bucephalus. He knew that even a huge army could have a weak spot. The first big fight was at a place called the Granicus River. The Persian army waited on the other side of the river. The river itself was a problem. It was hard to cross, with slippery rocks and deep water. The Persians thought Alexander would wait until morning. They thought he would be too scared to attack right away. They were wrong. Alexander did something totally unexpected. He attacked at dusk, when the sun was going down. The light was tricky. It made things hard to see. He led his cavalry, his horse soldiers, right into the river. "Follow me," he roared. His voice echoed across the water. His men plunged in, shields up, swords ready. The Persians were surprised. They didn't expect such a bold move. They were caught off guard. This was a key secret: speed and surprise. Alexander moved faster than anyone thought possible. He didn't just win. He shattered the Persian line. He fought bravely, right in the front, like any of his soldiers. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. This made his men love him even more. They would do anything for their king. This bond with his men was a very big secret to his success. After Granicus, Alexander kept moving. He moved like a storm, sweeping across the land. He freed Greek cities that the Persians had taken over. He showed everyone that he was not just a warrior, but also a liberator. People started to believe in him. They saw him as a hero, not just a conqueror. This was smart. He made friends, not just enemies. Next came the Battle of Issus. King Darius himself was there, with an even bigger army. Darius had thousands of soldiers, chariots, and archers. The battlefield was a narrow strip of land between mountains and the sea. Darius thought this narrow space would help him, because Alexander's smaller army couldn't move around much. He thought it would be like a funnel, trapping Alexander. But Alexander saw it differently. He saw the narrow space as his advantage. He knew that a huge army could not use all its soldiers at once in a small area. Many of Darius's soldiers would just stand there, unable to fight. Alexander put his best fighters, his Macedonian phalanx, in the middle. These men had long, long spears, like porcupine quills. They were a solid wall of iron. Alexander then did his famous hammer and anvil trick. He led his best horse soldiers, his companions, on the right side. He charged at a weak point in Darius's army, like a hammer hitting a nail, while his phalanx held the middle like an anvil. Alexander's horsemen smashed through the Persian left wing. They broke it completely. Then, Alexander turned his horsemen and rode behind Darius's main army. Imagine this, a huge army, fighting bravely in front, suddenly has enemies attacking from behind. It was pure chaos. Darius, seeing his army crumbling and Alexander's men getting closer, panicked. He jumped into his chariot and sped away, leaving his army behind. This was another huge win for Alexander. He didn't just beat the enemy, he broke their spirit. He showed them that their king was a coward. Alexander didn't stop there. He marched south, to the land of Phoenicia, where famous cities like Tyre were. Tyre was a city on an island, like a fortress floating in the sea. It had huge walls, taller than any building. It seemed impossible to capture. The people of Tyre laughed at Alexander. "You can't get us," they shouted from their walls. "We are safe." But Alexander was very stubborn. He looked at the sea, and he looked at the island. He thought, if I can't reach the island, I will build a bridge to it. And that's what he did. His engineers and soldiers started building a huge causeway, a land bridge, right across the water. It was a massive project, taking many months. The Tyrians threw rocks and shot arrows. They even sent fire ships. But Alexander kept pushing. His men worked day and night. They built huge siege towers, taller than the walls of Tyre, and put them on boats. They brought special machines that could smash walls. Finally, after 7 long months, Alexander's army broke through the walls. Tyre fell. This showed another secret: never give up. Even when things look impossible, keep trying. Build a path where there is none. After Tyre, Alexander went to Egypt. The Egyptians hated the Persians who ruled them. When Alexander arrived, they welcomed him like a hero, like a god. They crowned him pharaoh, their king. Alexander was smart. He didn't just conquer, he understood the people he conquered. He respected their gods and their ways. He built a new city there, named after himself, Alexandria. This city became a famous center for learning and trade, a place where people from all over the world came together. Building cities was another one of Alexander's clever moves. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about creating something new, something lasting. It showed he was a builder, not just a destroyer. He wanted to mix Greek ideas with the ideas of the East. This was a very big, long-term plan. He was thinking years ahead, not just about the next battle. Then came the biggest battle of all, Gaugamela. This was the final showdown with King Darius. Darius had gathered an army even bigger than before. Some stories say he had 1,000,000 soldiers. He had war chariots with scythes, sharp blades on their wheels, to cut down soldiers. He had elephants, like giant tanks. Darius chose a huge, flat plain for the battle. He made sure the ground was smooth so his chariots could charge easily. He thought, on this wide plain, my numbers will crush Alexander. But Alexander, again, had a different idea. He knew Darius's plan. He knew Darius expected a head-on fight. So Alexander did something unexpected again. He marched his army in a strange, crooked line, not straight. He moved them to the right, far to the right, almost off the battlefield. Darius watched, confused. What is he doing? He wondered. Darius then made a mistake. He sent his cavalry, his best horsemen, to stop Alexander from moving off the field. This opened up a gap in Darius's own battle line, like a door left ajar. Alexander saw it. He waited for the perfect moment. Then, with a mighty roar, he turned his army. His best soldiers, the companions, charged straight into that gap, right at Darius himself. It was a brilliant move. It was like magic. Darius was in the middle of his huge army, thinking he was safe. But Alexander went for the head, not the body. He went straight for the king. The battle was long and fierce. The air was filled with the clash of swords and the shouts of men. Alexander fought like a lion. His men, inspired by him, fought with incredible bravery. Darius, once again, saw Alexander's shining armor getting closer and closer. He saw his own army breaking. He panicked and ran away. For the last time, Gaugamela was the biggest victory. It proved that Alexander was truly a master of war. He didn't just win with strength, he won with his brain. He outsmarted his enemies. This was his most powerful secret strategy, thinking several steps ahead, like in a game of chess. After Gaugamela, the Persian Empire was truly broken. Alexander entered Babylon, a magnificent city with huge walls and beautiful gardens. He was welcomed as a liberator. He showed respect to the people and their gods. He let them keep their traditions. He sat on Darius's throne. He was now the king of the world's biggest empire. But Alexander didn't stop. He pushed his men further and further, into lands no Greek had ever seen. He went to the far eastern lands, into what is now Afghanistan and India. His men were tired. They had marched for years. They missed their homes. They wanted to go back. In India, Alexander faced new challenges. He met King Porus, a mighty ruler with huge war elephants. The Battle of the Hydaspes River was another tough fight. The river was swollen and fast. Porus waited on the other side, ready for Alexander. Alexander used another clever trick. He marched his army up and down the river for many days, making fires, pretending he would cross in different places. This confused Porus. He didn't know where Alexander would attack. Then, one dark and stormy night, Alexander took a small part of his army far upstream, where Porus didn't expect him. He crossed the river in the middle of the storm, hidden by the rain and thunder. He caught Porus by surprise. Even with the powerful elephants, Alexander's army fought bravely. His men had learned how to fight elephants. They jabbed them with spears, making them angry and turn on their own side. Alexander won, but it was a very hard victory. He was so impressed with Porus's bravery that he let Porus keep his kingdom and even gave him more land. This showed another side of Alexander. He respected brave enemies, but the men had had enough. They had been fighting for 10 years. They had marched thousands of miles. They were exhausted. They told Alexander, "We can't go any further. We want to go home." Alexander was angry at first. He wanted to go further, to the very end of the world. But he also loved his men. He knew he couldn't force them. So, Alexander finally agreed to turn back. The journey back was even harder than the journey there. They crossed vast, hot deserts where many men died of thirst and hunger. Alexander shared their hardships. He walked with them, ate what they ate, and drank what they drank. One story tells that when his men found a small helmet full of water in the desert, they brought it to Alexander. He looked at it, then poured it onto the sand. "If I drink, and my men are thirsty, I am no king," he said. This act of leadership, sharing in their suffering, was another of his powerful secrets. It made his men trust him completely. Alexander returned to Babylon. He had conquered the largest empire the world had ever seen. He was a hero, a legend. He started planning new things, like sailing around the whole world. But his body was tired. He had fought many battles, faced many dangers, and lived a very hard life. One day, he got sick. He grew weaker and weaker. His generals gathered around his bed, sad and worried. They asked him, "Who will rule your empire after you, great king?" Alexander looked at them with tired eyes. He whispered his last words, "To the strongest." Then, he closed his eyes forever. He was only 32 years old. Alexander the Great died, but his story lived on. His empire was huge, so huge that his generals fought over it. It split into many parts. But his legacy, his impact, was enormous. He spread Greek culture and ideas across the world. He built cities that lasted for centuries. He showed that with courage, smart plans, and belief in yourself and your team, you can achieve amazing things. So, what were Alexander's secret strategies? They weren't just about swords and spears. They were about 1. Observing closely, like seeing the horse's fear of its shadow. Looking for the enemy's weak spot. 2. Speed and surprise, attacking when least expected, moving faster than anyone thought possible. 3. Bold leadership, leading from the front, showing no fear, inspiring his men to fight like lions. 4. Flexibility, changing plans on the fly, not being stuck in one way of thinking. 5. Understanding people, respecting different cultures, making friends, not just enemies. 6. Patience and persistence, building a causeway to an island city, never giving up. 7. Outsmarting the enemy, the hammer and anvil trick, going for the king instead of the whole army. 8. Sharing hardship, being with his men through thick and thin, building trust. 9. Thinking ahead, not just winning the battle, but building cities and planning for the future. These were the true secrets of Alexander the Great. He was more than a soldier. He was a genius, a visionary, a legend whose story still inspires us today. He proved that the greatest power isn't just in the biggest army, but in the sharpest mind and the bravest heart. He truly was the king of the world, and his secrets are still whispered through time. Hidden stories of the Crusades. Imagine a time long, long ago, when knights in shining armor rode horses into faraway lands. But what if the history books only told us part of the story? What if ancient secrets, hidden for centuries, waited beneath the desert sands, secrets that could change everything we thought we knew about those brave, dangerous times? Our story starts with a boy named Alara. He wasn't a knight or a king. He was just a young man living in a small village nestled among rocky hills, not far from the big city of Jerusalem. Many hundreds of years ago, Alara had kind eyes and a curious mind. He loved to listen to the whispers of the wind through the old olive trees, imagining all the stories they must have seen. His village was peaceful, but everyone knew the world outside was full of noise and war. Knights from far-off lands, called crusaders, had come to these holy lands, and their battles often shook the ground. Alara lived with his grandmother, an old woman named Zahara. Her face was a map of wrinkles, each one a story etched by time. Zahara was different from other villagers. She often spoke in riddles and had a knowing look in her deep-set eyes. People respected her, but also kept a little distance, sensing there was something ancient and powerful about her. She taught Alara about herbs and plants, and about listening to the quiet voices of the world. One hot, dusty afternoon, Alara was helping Zahara gather herbs near an old, crumbling wall. The sun beat down, making the air shimmer. Suddenly, Zahara stopped. Her hand shot out, grabbing Alara's arm with surprising strength. Her eyes were wide, staring at something beyond the wall. Alara looked, but saw only dry bushes and shimmering air. "The time is close, little one," Zahara whispered, her voice raspy. The whispers are growing louder. The veil thins. Alara didn't fully understand. He often didn't. But he felt a shiver run down his spine. Zahara often spoke like this, talking about whispers and veils. He just thought it was old age, or maybe old wisdom. That evening, a rider arrived in their village. He was a crusader knight, but not like the ones Alara usually saw. This knight, Sir Kale, rode a tired horse and wore dusty, dented armor. His face was grim and tired, not proud and strong. He asked for Zahara, by name. This surprised everyone. How did a crusader know Zahara? Zahara greeted Sir Kale with a strange calmness, as if she had been expecting him. They spoke in low tones, in a language Alara didn't understand, a mix of old words and hushed whispers. Alara watched from a distance, his heart beating a little faster. He caught glimpses of maps being unfolded, and saw Sir Kale point to a spot far out in the desert, a place known for its dangerous heat and ancient ruins. The next morning, Zahara announced she was leaving. She would go with Sir Kale. Alara was shocked. "Grandmother, no. The desert is dangerous. And with a crusader," he pleaded. Zahara smiled, a gentle, sad smile. "Some journeys must be made, Alara. And some secrets must be found, before they are lost forever. You are ready to know more." She pressed a small, smooth stone into his hand. It was warm, like it held a tiny fire. "This stone will guide you, when the time comes. It sings with the truth." Then, with a last hug, she rode off with Sir Kale, leaving Alara alone, watching their figures shrink against the vast, empty horizon. He felt a deep ache in his chest, a mix of fear and a strange excitement. Days turned into weeks. Alara missed Zahara terribly. The village felt emptier without her quiet wisdom. He held the stone often, feeling its warmth. One night, a fierce sandstorm rolled in, like a giant angry beast. The wind howled, sand whipped through the air, scratching at the houses. Alara huddled indoors, terrified. When the storm finally passed, morning broke with a strange, eerie quiet. The world was blanketed in a fine layer of sand. Alara stepped outside, blinking in the pale sunlight. He looked towards the desert, towards the direction Zahara had gone. That's when he saw it. A glint, far off, barely visible. It looked like metal. He knew, somehow, it was a sign. He felt the stone in his hand grow hot, pulsating. It was almost burning. This was his grandmother's sign. He had to go. Alara gathered a small bag of water and dried fruit. He didn't tell anyone. He just left, following the strange pull of the stone, walking towards the glint in the desert. The sun was already climbing high, turning the sand golden. The desert was much bigger and scarier than he had imagined. Every dune looked the same. The heat pressed down on him, but the stone in his hand guided him, pulling him in a steady direction. He walked for hours, feeling his skin bake, his throat dry. He saw ancient tracks of animals, but no signs of people. He worried about Zahara. What if she was in danger? Finally, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery orange and purple, Alara saw it. A strange shape, half buried in the sand. It was a metal shield, a crusader shield, with a cross etched upon it, and next to it, a small, simple wooden staff. Zahara's staff. His heart leaped into his throat. He ran, stumbled, and fell. There, half covered by fresh sand, was a small, hidden entrance. It looked like a crack in a large rock formation, barely wide enough for a person. It had been uncovered by the sandstorm. The glint he saw was not the shield, but a small metal symbol carved into the rock above the opening. The stone in his hand vibrated wildly now. This was it. Alara squeezed through the narrow opening. Inside, the air was cool and still, like a long-held breath. It smelled of dust and old earth. He lit a small torch he had brought, and its flickering light showed him a narrow passage leading downwards. He could hear a faint, strange humming sound. His fear mixed with a powerful urge to explore. He walked deeper, the passage spiraling down. The humming grew louder, a low, constant thrum. Then, the passage opened into a large, hidden chamber. Alara gasped. This was not like any cave he had ever seen. The walls were smooth, carved with symbols he didn't recognize, and in the center, a huge, glowing object. It was a giant crystal, bigger than Alara himself, pulsing with a soft, blue light. It was the source of the humming. Around it, he saw figures, not alive, but carved into the rock, like statues. They wore robes and looked different from anyone he knew. They looked ancient, wise, and then he saw them. Zahara and Sir Kale. They were both standing near the crystal, looking at the ancient carvings. Zahara looked strong, her eyes fixed on a specific symbol on the wall. Sir Kale looked less like a warrior and more like a scholar, carefully tracing lines with his finger. They hadn't seen him yet. Ilara stayed hidden, his heart pounding a frantic drum solo. He watched as Zahara pointed to a carving, a symbol shaped like a star with many points, surrounded by a circle. She spoke in her strange, old language, and Sir Kale listened intently. He seemed to understand. Then, Sir Kale placed his hand on a specific spot on the wall, near the star symbol. A low rumble started. The whole chamber shook. Ilara watched in awe and terror. A section of the wall slowly slid open, revealing another, smaller room. Inside, bathed in the blue light of the main crystal, was a collection of objects. Not gold or jewels, but strange tools, ancient scrolls, and what looked like a chest made of a dark, unknown metal. Zahara and Sir Kale stepped into the new room. Ilara crept closer, careful not to make a sound. He saw Zahara carefully open one of the scrolls. Her eyes scanned the ancient writing. A look of deep understanding, and a little sadness, crossed her face. She motioned to Sir Kale. "The truth," Zahara said, her voice clear and strong, though still in that old language. "It is all here. The true purpose." Ilara strained to listen, trying to make sense of the few words he recognized. The star heart, the reason for their journey. Not conquest, but protection. Sir Kale nodded slowly. He looked tired, but his eyes shone with a new light. "For so long, the stories have been twisted. The history books wrong. They sought not to take, but to keep safe." He picked up a small, intricately carved box from the chest. It was made of the same dark metal. Zahara looked at the box. "The key to the veil. It opens not a door, but a path of understanding. It shows the connection." She turned, and her eyes met Ilara's. He froze. She had known he was there all along. A gentle smile touched her lips. "Come, my curious one. The time is now. You are part of this story." Ilara stepped out from his hiding place, feeling a little embarrassed, but mostly amazed. He looked at the giant crystal, then at the strange objects. "Grandmother, what is all this?" he whispered, his voice shaking slightly. Zahara walked to him, taking his hand. "This, Ilara, is a place of power. This crystal, the star heart, was left here by ancient ones, long, long before any of us. It is a source of knowledge, a way to see beyond what our eyes normally see." The Crusades, as they are known, began with a different mission for some. She looked at Sir Kale. Many knights came here for land, for glory, for their faith. But a select few, a secret order, knew of this place. They were not here to fight for Jerusalem in the way the world believed. They were here to guard it, to guard the star heart, and the knowledge it holds. Sir Kale added, "Our ancestors, a hidden brotherhood within the Crusaders, learned of this place from wise local guardians, like Zahara's own family. They formed a pact. The world saw war, but a secret war was fought to protect this chamber from those who would misuse its power." He pointed to some of the ancient tools. These were used to connect with the crystal, to understand its messages, to see glimpses of truth. Zahara opened one of the ancient scrolls. It was covered in drawings of stars, constellations, and what looked like pathways between them. The ancient ones who built this place, they were travelers of the cosmos. They left this star heart as a beacon, a way to share knowledge across vast distances, to show that all life is connected, that there is more to the universe than our small Earth. Ilara stared at the scroll, his mind struggling to grasp it all. "Travelers, from the stars, like the stories of the night sky?" "Precisely," Zahara said, her eyes twinkling. "The legends we tell, the myths, they are often echoes of truth. This chamber, this star heart, it was a bridge. It showed them how to live in peace, how to understand the rhythms of the world, how to heal." Sir Kale held up the dark metal box. "But some, in every age, seek power for themselves. They would want this knowledge to control, not to help. Our secret order of crusaders was formed to prevent that, to ensure that this star heart and its wisdom remained hidden, protected." He looked sad. "Many died, fighting battles that the history books record as religious wars, but for some, the true fight was here, in the shadows." Zahara nodded. "My family has been guardians for generations, passing down the knowledge of this place, waiting for the right moment." The sandstorm, it was not just a storm. It was a sign. The star heart called. It felt a change coming, a time when its message might be needed again. "A message of peace?" Ilara asked. "A message of connection," Zahara corrected gently. "That we are all part of something larger, that our differences are small when seen from the perspective of the stars. The wars, the fighting, they are born from forgetting this truth." Sir Kale opened the dark metal box. Inside, it was empty. But then, as he held it towards the glowing crystal, a faint light began to shimmer inside the box. It grew brighter, shaping itself into a miniature, swirling galaxy. Ilara gasped. It was like holding a tiny piece of the night sky. "This is the key," Sir Kale explained. "It doesn't open a lock. It connects. It shows the path between worlds, between understandings. It holds the echoes of the ancient traveler's journey." Zahara put her hand on Ilara's shoulder. "My family guarded the location." Sir Kale's order guarded against those who would seek to exploit it. Two different peoples, two different faiths, united by a single, secret purpose. This is the hidden story of the Crusades, Ilara. Not just a clash of empires, but a silent, shared guardianship of something sacred. Ilara looked from the glowing box to the huge crystal, then to his grandmother's wise face. He thought of all the history lessons he'd heard, all the tales of heroes and villains, of conquest and glory. None of them mentioned this. None of them mentioned the shared secret, the joint effort of people from different worlds, protecting a cosmic truth. "But why keep it secret, grandmother?" he asked. "Why not tell everyone about the Starheart? About the peace?" Zahara sighed, a sound like rustling dry leaves. "Because, little one, not everyone is ready for such truth. The world was, and still is, full of fear and anger. Some truths are too big, too powerful, for people who are not ready to hear them. They would twist it, use it for their own gain. The Starheart's power is too great to fall into greedy hands." Sir Kale nodded grimly. "We saw it happen before. Small glimpses of this knowledge, misused, led to terrible destruction. Our orders learned the hard way. Secrecy was the only protection for the Starheart, and for humanity." "So, what now?" Ilara asked, feeling the weight of this incredible secret. "What are you going to do?" Zahara looked at him with love in her eyes. "We continue to guard. But the key, Ilara, it has been waiting for someone. Someone with a pure heart, a mind open to wonder. I believe it is you. You will be the new guardian of the key, and of this secret." Ilara's eyes widened. "Him, a simple village boy? Me? But I don't know anything about stars or ancient travelers." "You know how to listen," Zahara said gently. "You know how to wonder. You see beyond the surface. That is what is needed. The key will guide you, as the stone guided you here. It will speak to your heart." She handed the dark metal box, now softly glowing, to Ilara. It felt warm and surprisingly light in his hands. As Ilara held the box, the miniature galaxy inside pulsed, and a strange calm filled him. He felt a connection, not just to the box, but to everything around him. To the ancient chamber, to the giant crystal, to his grandmother, to Sir Kale, and even to the vast, silent desert outside. Sir Kale then spoke, his voice filled with a different kind of respect. "My Crusader order, or what remains of it, has dwindled. The world has changed. Our paths are becoming harder to maintain. But the knowledge of this chamber and its purpose must not die. It must pass to the next generation. A generation perhaps ready to carry its truth into a new era." He looked at Zahara. "My people believe it is time for the two lines of guardians to fully merge. For the ancient wisdom of the land and the secret keepers from afar to unite in purpose, openly." Zahara smiled. "Indeed. The veil thins, Ilara. The world is changing. It is learning, slowly. Perhaps one day, the truth of the Starheart will not need to be a secret. Perhaps one day, all of humanity will be ready to understand its message of cosmic connection and peace." Ilara looked down at the glowing box in his hands. He was just a boy, but he held a secret that could rewrite history, a truth that could heal the world. He was now a part of the hidden stories of the Crusades, a story not of war, but of a quiet, shared hope, passed down through time. He knew his life would never be the same. His journey had just truly begun. He had to learn to protect this secret, to understand its power, and to wait for the day when the world would be ready to hear the true whispers of the stars. He looked at the giant crystal, still humming its low, steady song, and for the first time, he felt like he truly belonged to something ancient and magnificent. He was the guardian of a hidden legacy, a cosmic truth veiled in the dust of history, waiting for its moment to shine. And he knew, deep in his heart, that this was the most important story of all. Forgotten battles that changed history. Imagine a world where everything you learned about history was just a small piece of a much bigger, wilder puzzle. What if some of the most important moments, the ones that truly shaped our lives today, were lost in old books, forgotten in time? Today, we dig deep into one such forgotten war, a battle so fierce, so strange, that it changed everything, but almost nobody remembers it. Get ready, because the true story is about to unfold. Our journey begins not with kings or grand armies, but with a simple farmer named Ilara. She lived in a land called the Whispering Valley, a place nestled between tall, jagged mountains and a vast, shimmering lake. Her days were spent under the warm sun, her hands in the rich, dark soil, planting seeds that would feed her village. The air always smelled of pine and fresh earth, and the only sounds were birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves. Ilara was small, but strong. Her hair was the color of wheat, and her eyes were bright green, always watching, always curious. She loved her quiet life, the the rhythm of the seasons, and the comforting predictability of her world. Every morning, she would wake with the first rays of dawn, eat a simple breakfast of bread and berries, and head out to her field. One unusually hot summer, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, still, as if holding its breath. The usual forest creatures were quiet. The birds stopped singing their morning songs. Elara felt a strange tingle on her skin, a feeling like electricity right before a big storm. She tried to tell herself it was just the heat, but a shiver ran down her spine. Her village, nestled by the winding river, was usually full of laughter and chatter. But now, even the children played more quietly. The elders sat by their fires, their faces wrinkled with worry, whispering old stories that spoke of shadows and distant thunder. Elara overheard bits and pieces, the great silence, the forgotten war, when the mountains cried. She didn't fully understand, but the words sent a chill through her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples, Elara's grandmother, Lyra, called her. Lyra was the oldest person in the village, her eyes like deep pools of ancient knowledge. She sat by the hearth, the firelight dancing on her wise face. "Elara," she began, her voice soft like a lullaby, "the old stories are waking up." Lyra explained that long, long ago, even before her own grandparents were born, a terrible shadow fell over their land. It wasn't an army of men, not like the tales of brave knights. No, this was something different, something from the deep earth. She spoke of creatures that moved like nightmares, their skin like stone, their eyes like burning coals. They came from deep below, bringing a strange, silent cold. These creatures, Lyra called them the grumblers, didn't want land or gold. They wanted silence. They wanted to take away all sound, all laughter, all music, leaving only a cold, empty quiet. They had once swept across the world, turning vibrant lands into silent, dusty wastes. And our world today, Lyra whispered, was saved by a battle so strange, so impossible, that it was erased from memory. Elara listened, wide-eyed. It sounded like a scary bedtime story, but her grandmother's voice held a serious, heavy truth. "Why don't we know about this, Grandma?" she asked, her voice a tiny whisper. Lyra sighed, a long, weary sound. "Because the cost was too great. To win, our ancestors had to make a choice that made everyone forget. But the memory, Elara, lives in the land. And sometimes, the land remembers, and it sends warnings." The strange quiet in the valley grew stronger each day. Animals moved away. The river's usual babble became a murmur. Elara even noticed that her own footsteps seemed softer on the earth. She started to see things, too. Flickers of movement in the corner of her eye, shadows that seemed to hold still when she looked directly at them. One morning, while checking her traps in the forest, she found a strange, small stone. It was smooth and dark, but it hummed with a tiny, silent vibration when she held it. It felt cold, almost too cold. She tucked it into her pocket, feeling a strange pull towards it. It was like a tiny piece of the mystery her grandmother had spoken about. The next night, the air grew even colder, even though it was still summer. A strange mist began to creep down from the mountains, not like the usual morning fog, but thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth and something metallic. The mist seemed to eat sound. The crackling fire in the village square sounded muffled, far away. Then, from the heart of the mist, came the first sound. It wasn't a roar or a scream. It was a low, rumbling groan, deep enough to shake the very ground. The grumblers were back. Panic erupted. Villagers cried out, grabbing their children, their faces pale with terror. Elara saw her grandmother standing tall, her eyes fixed on the creeping mist. "It begins," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the fear. The battle of whispering echoes. Out of the mist, they emerged, not in a rush, but slowly, deliberately. They were huge, easily twice the size of a man. Their bodies were like rough, jagged rocks, dark and gray, with sharp edges. Their arms were thick, ending in blunt, powerful hands. And their eyes, oh, their eyes. They glowed with a dull, orange light, like embers in a dying fire, and they held no kindness, no thought, only a terrible, ancient hunger for silence. These were the grumblers. Their movement was silent, save for that deep, earth-shaking rumble that came from somewhere inside them, a sound that seemed to vibrate in your very bones. They moved towards the village, slowly but surely, like mountains walking. The villagers had no army. They were farmers, weavers, woodcutters. Their tools were for life, not for war. But as the grumblers drew closer, a strange determination settled on their faces. They remembered the stories, even if the details were lost. They knew what was at stake. Lyra, the old woman, stepped forward, holding a gnarled staff. "They fear sound," she cried, her voice echoing strangely in the quiet air. "They hunger for silence. We must make noise." And so, the desperate, forgotten battle began. It wasn't with swords and shields. It was with everything they had. Children began to beat on pots and pans with spoons, making a clanging racket. Women started singing, their voices trembling but growing stronger. Men grabbed sticks and drums, anything that could make a loud sound. The grumblers, at first, seemed confused. The strange, clanging, singing sounds hit them like invisible waves. Their glowing eyes flickered. Some of them paused, their rumbling bodies shaking slightly. But they kept coming. Elara, clutching the strange, humming stone in her hand, saw her grandmother leading the charge, not with weapons, but with a song. It was an ancient, powerful melody, full of the history of their valley, the laughter of generations, the whispers of the wind. Lyra's voice, surprisingly strong, soared above the growing cacophony of the village. The strange stone in Elara's hand began to hum louder, vibrating against her palm. It grew warm, then hot. As the villagers made more noise, as the music and banging filled the air, the stone began to pulse with a faint, blue light. Elara looked at it, then at the grumblers. The creatures seemed to recoil slightly when the blue light pulsed. The stones, Lyra suddenly shouted, pointing to other villagers. Find the echo stones, the ones that hum. Suddenly, other people started to remember. They had seen these stones before, felt their strange vibrations. Some had used them as doorstops, others as weight. Now, they hurried to find them, and as each stone was found and held, it began to glow, adding to the strange, blue light. It turned out, these were the echo stones, ancient relics used in the first forgotten battle. They didn't just glow, they amplified sound. When someone sang near an echo stone, the sound didn't just travel normally. It became bigger, stronger, more focused, like a beam of pure noise. Elara realized that the villagers weren't just making noise. They were turning their sounds into weapons. The children's clanging pots became sharp, piercing attack. The women's singing became a warm, protective wall of sound. The men's drumming became a steady, pounding rhythm that vibrated through the very ground. The grumblers hated it. They recoiled. Their stony skin seemed to crack slightly at the force of the amplified sounds. Their glowing eyes dimmed. The deep rumble inside them grew erratic, like a broken machine. They slowed, they staggered. Some even turned, trying to retreat back into the mist. But there were so many of them. More kept emerging from the creeping mist, a never-ending wave of silence-hungry monsters. The villagers were getting tired. Their voices grew hoarse, their arms ached from banging. Fear started to creep back in, chilling their resolve. Elara looked at her grandmother, whose face was streaked with sweat but still held that fierce determination. She saw the villagers, their faces strained, but still making noise. She knew they couldn't give up. Holding her echo stone high, Elara remembered her grandmother's words about the land remembering. The valley itself, the mountains, the lake, they all held echoes of the first battle. What if they could wake up the land itself? She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the humming stone, on the connection she felt to the earth beneath her bare feet. She thought of the rich soil she tilled, the strong trees, the clear river. She remembered the peaceful sounds of her home, the sounds the grumblers wanted to steal. Then, she started to sing. It wasn't a song she knew, not from the village. It was a song that seemed to rise from deep within her, a melody of the earth itself. It was soft at first, but with the echo stone, it grew, taking on a rich, resonant quality. As Elara sang, the blue light from her stone grew brighter, stretching out like a beam. And then, an amazing thing happened. The ground itself began to hum. Not just vibrate, but to hum with a low, deep resonance that joined Elara's song. The ancient trees in the forest around them began to whisper, not with wind, but with a deep, resonant murmur. The river water began to ripple in time with her melody. It was as if the land itself was waking up, joining the fight. The mountains, silent witnesses for centuries, began to send down echoes of Elara's song, multiplying its power. The grumblers stopped dead. The sound was too much for them. It wasn't just loud, it was fundamental. It was the sound of existence, the very hum of the world. They shuddered. Their stony bodies began to crack, not just small lines, but deep, spiderweb cracks that spread across their forms. Their glowing eyes dimmed to tiny sparks, then winked out completely. With a final, terrible, silent shudder, the first grumbler crumbled. It didn't fall apart with a crash, but dissolved into fine dust, like old, dry earth. Then another, and another. The mist, which had been thick and heavy, began to swirl, picking up the dust, creating a strange, dark cloud. The villagers watched in awe and horror as the ancient enemies turned to dust, carried away by the wind. The silence that followed was not the heavy, dead silence of the grumblers, but a vast, empty quiet, full of the lingering echoes of the battle. The mist slowly lifted, revealing the dawn. The sun rose, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. But the valley was changed. Where the grumblers had stood, there were only faint, dark stains on the ground, and a strange, almost musical hum still lingered in the air. Elara stood, exhausted, her voice hoarse, but a profound sense of relief washed over her. The echo stone in her hand was now cool and dark again, just a simple stone. She looked at her grandmother, who smiled, a deep, knowing smile. "We did it, Grandma," Elara whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Yes, Elara," Lyra said, her voice filled with pride. "You reminded the land of its song. You reminded everyone of the echo." But the battle wasn't truly over. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows, Lyra gathered the villagers. "The grumblers are gone for now," she said, her voice serious. "But the memory of their coming, and the terrible power of the echo stones, is too dangerous. This knowledge cannot be allowed to spread, or it will draw them back, or worse, be used by others for ill." The villagers, remembering the fear, the horror, and the immense effort it took, agreed. This battle, they decided, would be forgotten. The echo stones would be gathered and hidden, deep within the earth, their humming power quieted. The story would become a whisper, then a legend, then nothing but a strange feeling that sometimes lingered in the valley. They agreed to wipe the detailed memory, to let the specifics fade like mist. It was a sacrifice, a heavy price for peace. The true history of the Battle of Whispering Echoes would be stored not in books, but in the heart of the valley itself, waiting for another time it might be needed. Elara watched as the villagers, with heavy hearts, began their task. They buried the glowing stones, not in a single pile, but scattered them far and wide, deep below the soil, where only the earth could feel their silent hum. As they worked, a strange forgetfulness began to settle over them. The sharp details of the grumblers' forms, the exact sounds of the battle, the precise words spoken, they started to blur, to become hazy, like a dream fading after waking. Elara felt it too, a gentle slipping away of the crisp edges of memory. She tried to hold on to the image of the grumblers' glowing eyes, but it felt like trying to grasp smoke. She remembered the feeling of terror, the surge of power when she sang, but the how and why began to melt away. It was a strange, almost peaceful process, like a heavy burden slowly being lifted. Soon, the only thing that remained was a shared sense of profound relief, a quiet understanding that something terrible had been averted. The valley returned to its peaceful rhythm, but with a subtle difference. The birds sang a little louder, the river seemed to babble with more joy, and the wind carried a faint, almost musical whisper through the trees. It was as if the land itself was celebrating its victory, even if its human inhabitants couldn't quite remember why. Elara went back to her fields, her hands once again in the warm earth. The sun felt warmer, the soil more alive. She still had her green eyes, full of curiosity, but now they also held a deep, unexplainable wisdom. She couldn't recall the exact moment of the grumblers' crumbling, or the full power of her song, but she remembered the feeling of connection to the earth, the incredible power of sound. Sometimes, when she tilled the soil, she would hum a strange, wordless tune. It wasn't a village song, but a melody that felt ancient and powerful, resonating deep within her. The plants seemed to grow stronger where she hummed, and the earth felt particularly vibrant beneath her feet. She didn't know why she did it, but it felt right, like tending to an old, familiar friend. Life in the Whispering Valley continued. Generations passed. The story of the grumblers became a vague old tale, something a grandparent might mention about a time when the world was very quiet. The echo stones were completely forgotten, hidden deep within the earth, their silent hum a secret kept by the planet itself. But the impact of that forgotten battle, the Battle of Whispering Echoes, was immense. The grumblers, if they had won, would have turned the entire world into a silent, dead place. All music, all laughter, all communication would have ceased. Humanity might have withered away in that terrible quiet. Because of Elara and the villagers' sacrifice, because they chose to forget the painful details for peace, the world could continue to sing. Children could laugh, lovers could whisper, and music could fill the air. Every song, every word spoken, every joyous sound in our world today is, in a way, an echo of that forgotten battle. It's a powerful reminder that history isn't just about what we remember in books or monuments. Sometimes, the most important battles are the ones fought in desperation, remembered only by the land itself, and whose true impact shapes our entire world in ways we can't even imagine. And sometimes, the greatest heroes are those who choose to be forgotten, so that others may live on, vibrantly, loudly, in a world full of sound. The quiet hum beneath our feet, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, these are the gentle whispers of a truly ancient victory, waiting for us to listen closely. The mystery of the Roman legions. Imagine a time long, long ago, when mighty soldiers marched across the land. These were the Roman legions, famous and feared. But what if one day, an entire army, thousands of brave men, just vanished into thin air? Poof, gone forever. That's exactly what happened, and it's a mystery that still gives us goosebumps today. Our story begins in a place far from Rome, in a land called Germania. It was a wild, green place with thick forests and strong rivers. The year was 9 AD. 3 full Roman legions, led by a smart general named Publius Quinctilius Varus, were deep in these woods. Think of 3 giant groups of soldiers, each with thousands of men, their shiny armor glinting in the sunlight. They were very proud and very sure of themselves. General Varus was a good leader, but he didn't know the dark secrets of the German forests. He thought the local tribes were tamed, like friendly puppies. He was wrong. Deep in the shadows, a cunning German chief named Arminius was watching. Arminius had actually served in the Roman army, so he knew their ways. He knew their strengths, but more importantly, he knew their weaknesses. He was like a wolf disguised as a sheep. The weather began to change. Dark clouds rolled in, making the forest even gloomier. Rain started to fall, soft at first, then harder. The Roman soldiers, used to sunny lands, felt uncomfortable. Their heavy armor became even heavier when wet. Their leather sandals slipped in the mud. The path through the Teutoburg forest was narrow and winding. Tall, ancient trees pressed in on both sides, their branches thick like watchful eyes. General Varus had been tricked. Arminius had told him about a small problem in a nearby village, making it sound urgent. Varus, wanting to show Rome's power, decided to take his legions on a detour. This was Arminius's trap. Every step the Romans took deeper into the forest was another step closer to danger. The air grew heavy, not just with rain, but with a strange, quiet feeling. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The Roman soldiers, usually so orderly, started to get messy. Their long line, stretching for miles, broke up. Some carts got stuck in the mud. Men complained quietly, their voices muffled by the steady drumming of the rain on their helmets. They couldn't see far ahead or behind because of the thick trees and the pouring rain. They felt alone, even with thousands of comrades around them. Suddenly, a chilling scream pierced the air. It wasn't the scream of a Roman. Then another, and another. From every side, out of the deep, dark woods, fierce German warriors burst forth. They moved like ghosts, silent until they attacked. They wore animal skins, their faces painted, carrying sharp spears and axes. Their war cries were terrifying, echoing through the wet trees. Chaos erupted. The Romans, caught totally by surprise, tried to form their famous battle lines, but the narrow path and the slippery mud made it impossible. The trees were too close. They couldn't move together like they usually did. It was a nightmare. Arrows rained down from unseen enemies hiding in the canopy above. Spears flew from the bushes. General Varus shouted orders, his voice raw. He tried to rally his men, but panic spread like wildfire. The Germans knew every trick of this forest. They would attack, then melt back into the trees, only to appear somewhere else. They fought differently from the Romans. The Romans liked big, open battles where their shields and formations were strong. Here, in the dense woods, their strengths became weaknesses. Days turned into a bloody blur. The rain never stopped. The forest floor became a muddy, gory mess. Roman soldiers, tired and hungry, fought bravely, but they were being picked off one by one. Their shiny armor, once a sign of pride, became a heavy burden, slowing them down. Their swords, usually so deadly, felt clumsy in the tight spaces. Many Roman soldiers fell. Their cries of pain were drowned out by the thunder and the clash of metal. General Varus watched in horror as his proud legions crumbled. He saw his men, once so confident, now filled with despair. He knew there was no escape. The Germans had them trapped, like mice in a maze. In the end, General Varus, knowing all was lost, fell on his own sword. It was a Roman way to die with honor rather than be captured. Many of his officers did the same. The battle was over. But it wasn't just a battle, it was a total disaster. Almost all of the 20,000 Roman soldiers were killed. 3 entire legions, their eagles, their special flags, and all their glory, were gone. The Roman Empire was shocked. When news reached Emperor Augustus in Rome, he was heartbroken. He would famously cry out, "Quinctilius Varus, give me back my legions." He couldn't believe such a powerful army could simply vanish. The Teutoburg forest became a haunted place in Roman memory, a graveyard of lost dreams and brave men. For many years, the Roman Empire tried to forget the horror. They called the land Germania Invicta, unconquered Germania. But the memory of the lost legions lingered. The eagles, those precious symbols of Roman might, were never found. They were not just flags. They were the very soul of a legion. Losing an eagle was the greatest shame. Years passed, long years. The forest grew over the battle scars. Leaves fell, covering the bones and broken armor. It was like nature tried to erase the terrible event. But the story lived on in whispers, a chilling tale told around campfires. What truly happened to all the men? Where did their spirits go? And where were those precious eagles hidden? Then, one day, many years later, a famous Roman general named Germanicus, who was also a nephew of the emperor, decided he couldn't let the mystery rest. He was a brave and skilled leader. He gathered his own legions and marched back into the dreaded Teutoburg forest. He wanted to find answers. He wanted to give the lost soldiers a proper burial. As Germanicus and his men marched, a heavy silence hung in the air. The forest seemed to whisper secrets from the past. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made them jump. They knew they were walking on sacred, sorrowful ground. They imagined the cries of their ancestors echoing through the ancient trees. Finally, after days of searching, they found it. A gruesome, terrible sight. The battlefield was exactly as it had been left. Bones of men and horses lay scattered everywhere. Broken spears, rusty swords, and shattered shields lay half buried in the mud. Trees grew tall, their roots twisting around the remains of Roman soldiers. It was a silent, sorrowful monument to the disaster. Germanicus's men were horrified. They saw the skulls of their comrades nailed to tree trunks by the Germans. They saw altars where the Roman officers were sacrificed. It was a sight that would haunt them forever. They carefully gathered the bones, giving them a proper burial, a final rest. They built a mound of earth, a simple tomb for the brave, lost soldiers. But even after this somber task, the greatest mystery remained. The eagles, the sacred symbols of the legions. Germanicus searched and searched. His men combed every inch of the forest. They found many things, coins, broken armor pieces, even a general's belt buckle. But no eagles, not one. It was as if they had truly vanished. Germanicus fought fiercely against the German tribes in the years that followed. He was a skilled warrior, and he won many battles, avenging some of the Roman losses. And slowly, one by one, he managed to recover 2 of the 3 lost eagles. It was a huge triumph, celebrated loudly in Rome. But still, one eagle was missing. The eagle of the 19th Legion. Where did it go? Who had it? Did it fall into a deep river? Was it buried by the Germans as a war prize? Did it get hidden away in a secret place, never to be found? This final missing eagle became the ultimate enigma. It represented the ultimate loss, the enduring question mark over the Teutoburg forest. Centuries passed. The Roman Empire fell. New kingdoms rose and fell. The forest grew even thicker, even more ancient. The memory of the lost legions faded from everyday talk, becoming just a footnote in old, dusty book. But for some, the mystery never truly died. For archaeologists, people who dig up old things to learn about the past, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Many, many years later, in the 20th century, a man named Major Tony Clun was walking in the forest. He wasn't looking for Roman history, he was looking for treasure with a metal detector, hoping to find old coins from more recent wars. But his metal detector suddenly buzzed wildly. He dug down, not expecting much. What he found was not a modern coin, but a Roman coin. Not just any Roman coin, but one from the time of Augustus, the emperor who mourned the lost legions. This was a huge clue. He realized he might be standing on the very ground where the battle happened. This was huge. The exact location of the Teutoburg forest battle had been lost for almost 2,000 years. Soon, a team of smart archaeologists arrived. They started digging carefully, inch by inch, slowly revealing the secrets hidden under the earth. What they found was truly amazing. More coins, weapons, tools, and pieces of armor. So many Roman things. It was like opening a giant time capsule. They found more than just objects. They found the bones of soldiers, Roman and German, lying together where they fell. They saw the terrible story of the battle written in the earth itself. They even found parts of a Roman rampart, a small wall built in a hurry by the desperate Romans to try and protect themselves. Each new discovery was like a piece of a giant puzzle. They could see how the Romans were ambushed, how they tried to fight back, how they were trapped. The mud, the rain, the trees, it all came back to life through the things they found. It was a sad, amazing picture of courage and tragedy. But still, the ultimate prize, the final missing eagle, was not there. The archaeologists searched every pit, every corner. They found so much, but not the golden bird that symbolized a lost legion. It was frustrating. It felt like the forest was still holding on to its deepest secret. Some people wondered if the eagle was just a story. Maybe it was never really lost, or maybe it was just a regular flag. But no, the eagles were real, powerful symbols. They were crafted from precious metals, usually gold, and carried with immense pride. To lose one was the ultimate disgrace. To recover one, the ultimate honor. The mystery deepened. If 2 eagles were recovered, and the battle site was found, why couldn't they find the third? Was it hidden so well that even after 2 millennia, no one could reach it? Or was it moved, taken far away by the Germans as a trophy, and then lost to time in a completely different place? Imagine a German warrior, after the battle, looking at the shiny golden eagle. He knows it's important. He doesn't want it to be found by the Romans. Maybe he takes it deep into his own village, hiding it in a sacred cave. Or maybe he buries it in a bog, a wet, marshy area, hoping the mud and water will protect it forever. Bogs are excellent for preserving ancient things. Think about the feeling of that German warrior. He had defeated the mighty Romans. This eagle was a sign of his people's freedom, a trophy of their incredible victory. He wouldn't just leave it lying around. He would protect it fiercely. He would make sure it was lost to the Romans forever. The archaeologists kept digging, year after year. They studied the lay of the land, the old reports, everything they could find. They tried to think like the ancient Germans, to understand where they might have taken such a valuable prize. They used new technology, like ground-penetrating radar, to look under the earth without digging. But still, the eagle remained elusive. The Teutoburg forest, even today, holds a special power. It's not just a forest, it's a living museum of a terrible, pivotal moment in history. It's a place where you can almost hear the ghost of Roman soldiers, where you can feel the echoes of their final, desperate struggle. And in that feeling, in that history, lies the heart of the mystery. Perhaps the eagle is still there, hidden just a few feet away from where someone has already dug. Perhaps it's deeper, buried under centuries of dirt and roots. Or maybe, just maybe, it was taken far away, to a place no one has thought to look yet. A place known only to the spirits of the ancient German tribes. The story of the lost Roman legions is not just about a battle. It's about pride and humility, about cleverness and surprise, about loss and remembrance. It's about how even the mightiest empire can be brought to its knees. And it's about a mystery that has lasted for over 2,000 years, keeping us wondering and searching. Will the final eagle ever be found? Will its golden gleam ever again see the light of day, revealing the last secret of the Teutoburg forest? Or will it remain forever a legend, a whispers in the rustling leaves, a ghost of a golden bird, forever lost in the green, wild heart of Germania? The forest keeps its secrets close, reminding us that some mysteries are so deep, so ancient, they may never truly be solved. And that, in itself, is a powerful story. Secrets of the Samurai's Code. Imagine a time, long, long ago, in a land far across the big ocean. A land where brave warriors, called samurai, lived by a secret code. This code, Bushido, was more than just rules. It was a hidden path, full of secrets, bravery, and sometimes even heartbreak. Tonight, we will open a very old book and peek at a secret from that time. Our story begins in a quiet village, nestled among tall, green mountains. The year is 1582. Smoke from cooking fires drifted up to the bright blue sky. Children played with wooden swords, pretending to be the great samurai. But one young boy, Kenji, was different. Kenji did not play with the others. He sat by the old, big ginkgo tree, its leaves already turning gold, listening to the old stories. He loved to hear about honor and loyalty. Kenji was only 10 years old, with sharp, bright eyes and a spirit full of questions. His grandfather, a wise old man named Hiroshi, was the village elder. Hiroshi had seen many seasons. His face was lined like an old map, showing all the places he had been and all the things he had learned. He would often tell Kenji stories of the great samurai, but always, he would stop at a certain point, his eyes growing far away. One warm afternoon, Kenji found his grandfather sitting by the small river, watching the clear water run over smooth stones. "Grandfather," Kenji asked, his voice soft, "tell me about the lost scroll of Musashi. You always stop when you talk about it. What is so special about it?" Hiroshi turned, his eyes twinkling like stars in the evening sky. He sighed a long, slow sigh. "Ah, Kenji-kun," he said, using the polite way to say his name. "Some secrets are like very old tea. They need time to be truly understood. But today, perhaps, you are ready for a sip." Hiroshi beckoned Kenji closer. The air felt still, almost like the trees were listening too. "The scroll of Musashi is not just any scroll," Hiroshi began, his voice low and serious. "It is said to hold the deepest, most hidden part of Bushido. A part that many samurai masters believed was too powerful, too dangerous, to be known by everyone. It speaks of a way to fight not with a sword of steel, but with a sword of spirit. A way to win without ever drawing blood." Kenji's eyes grew wide. He had only ever known samurai as fierce fighters, their swords flashing in the sun. "But grandfather," Kenji whispered, "how can a samurai win without a sword? Isn't their sword their soul?" Hiroshi smiled sadly. "That is what many believe, young one. But the scroll of Musashi tells a different story. A story of balance, of seeing the unseen, of hearing the unheard. It was written by a great, wise warrior named Musashi. He was not just strong, he was incredibly smart. He understood people's hearts and minds." Hiroshi explained that Musashi, after many years of fighting, felt a deep sadness in his heart. He saw too much war, too much pain. He wanted to find a better way for samurai to protect their land and people without so much loss. So, he went on a long journey, seeking wisdom. He meditated under waterfalls, spoke to wise monks, and studied the movements of animals. He wrote all his biggest, most secret ideas on a special scroll, a scroll that became known as the Lost Scroll of Musashi. But why is it lost? Kenji asked, leaning forward, totally captivated. Who lost it? Hiroshi's face grew serious again. That, Kenji, is the biggest secret. After Musashi wrote it, he showed it to only a few very trusted samurai. They understood its power, but they also feared it. They worried that if this knowledge fell into the wrong hands, it could be used for bad, not good. Imagine a warrior who knows all your thoughts, all your fears, without you saying a word. Someone who could make you surrender just with their mind. Kenji shivered, even though the sun was warm. That sounded scary. So, they hid it, he asked. Yes, Hiroshi nodded slowly. They chose a guardian for the scroll, a family tasked with keeping its location a secret, generation after generation. Our family, Kenji. We are the guardians. Kenji gasped. His own family? This was huge. He looked at his grandfather with new eyes. All those quiet moments, all those old stories, now made sense. But the secret was almost lost many years ago, Hiroshi continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. A great lord, greedy for power, heard whispers of the scroll. He believed it would make him unbeatable. He sent his meanest warriors to find it. Our ancestors had to scatter, to hide, to protect the secret. Some died, but they never gave away the scroll's true hiding place. And now, the time might be coming again. Dark shadows are growing in the land. The old ways of peace are fading. People are getting ready for more war. Kenji felt a prickle of fear and excitement. He was a guardian. This was like the stories, but it was real. What do I need to do? He asked, his young voice firm. Hiroshi looked at him, a flicker of pride in his old eyes. First, you must understand Bushido deeply. Not just the fighting, but the heart. You must be kind, honest, and brave. You must learn to observe, to listen, to feel the world around you. And then, when the time is right, I will tell you where it is hidden. But you must swear, Kenji, to never use its power for yourself, only for peace, only to protect. Kenji nodded solemnly. He understood. This was not a game. This was a very serious promise. From that day on, Kenji's life changed. He still helped in the village, learning how to plant rice and care for the animals. But every evening, he would sit with his grandfather. Hiroshi would teach him about the stars, the seasons, the way the wind speaks through the trees. He taught Kenji how to move silently, like a cat, how to notice small things no one else saw. He taught him about the different types of samurai, and the ones who were very good at fighting with their hearts and minds, not just their swords. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Kenji grew taller, stronger. His mind felt sharper. He learned to feel the emotions of people around him, even before they spoke. He could tell if someone was sad, happy, or worried just by looking at their eyes. This was part of the secret, Hiroshi said. This was how Musashi fought without a sword. He understood the human heart. One stormy night, when the wind howled like a hungry wolf, a group of travelers arrived in the village. They were big, rough men, wearing dark clothing, not the bright colors of ordinary travelers. Their eyes were cold, like winter ice. They said they were merchants, but their hands rested often on the swords at their hips. Kenji felt a chill. These men were not good. He saw his grandfather watching them too, his face grim. The men demanded food and shelter, speaking in loud, harsh voices. They asked many questions about the village, about its history, about old tales. Kenji listened carefully. One of them, a big man with a scar on his face, kept looking at Hiroshi with a strange, knowing look. Kenji felt his heart beat fast. Could these be the ones his grandfather warned him about? That night, Kenji couldn't sleep. He crept to his grandfather's room. Hiroshi was awake, sitting by the window, watching the rain. Grandfather, Kenji whispered. Those men, they are not merchants, are they? Hiroshi turned, his eyes full of worry. No, Kenji, they are not. They are Lord Kageyama's men. Lord Kageyama is the greedy lord I told you about. He has not forgotten the scroll. He has been searching for it for years. And now, he has found our village. Kenji felt a wave of fear. Lord Kageyama was known for his cruelty, for taking what he wanted. What do we do? Kenji asked, his voice shaking a little. We protect the scroll, Hiroshi said firmly. And we protect our village. I will tell you now, Kenji, the hiding place. You must remember it. If anything happens to me, you must go there alone. Do not tell anyone else. Hiroshi drew a map on the dusty floor with his finger. Beyond the Whispering Falls, where the twin cherry trees meet, there is a small cave hidden behind a curtain of ivy. Inside, you will find a stone marked with 3 circles. Push the stone. Behind it is a hollow. The scroll is there, wrapped in silk, in a lacquered box. Kenji memorized every detail. He pictured the falls, the trees, the cave, the stone. He knew he had to be brave. The next morning, the supposed merchants were gone, but they left a message, a symbol carved into the old ginkgo tree. It was the symbol of Lord Kageyama. It meant, we know you are here. We will return. Fear spread through the village like a cold mist. People whispered, their faces pale. Hiroshi gathered everyone. We will not let them take our peace, he said, his voice strong despite his age. "We will stand together. We will protect what is ours." Kenji watched his grandfather. Hiroshi was not a warrior with a sword. He was an old man, but his spirit was like a mountain. Kenji understood what the scroll of Musashi meant. It wasn't just about fighting without a sword. It was about inner strength, about inspiring others, about protecting with your whole heart. A few days later, Lord Kageyama's army arrived. There were many, many soldiers, their armor glinting in the sun, their banners flapping in the wind. They surrounded the small village. Kenji stood with the other villagers, hidden behind the houses, watching. His heart pounded. This was not a story anymore. This was real. Lord Kageyama rode to the front, a huge man on a black horse, his face hard like stone. "Old man," he boomed, pointing at Hiroshi, "I know you hide something important. Give me the scroll of Musashi, and your village will be spared. Refuse, and it will burn." Hiroshi stepped forward, his back straight. "My lord," he said, his voice calm, "I know of no such scroll. We are simple villagers, seeking only peace." Lord Kageyama laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Do not lie to me, old fool. My spies are everywhere. I know your family has guarded it for generations. Give it to me now." He ordered his soldiers to search. They began to ransack houses, throwing things around, scaring the children. Kenji felt a burning anger in his chest. He wanted to fight, but what could a boy do against so many trained soldiers? He remembered his grandfather's words, "Fight not with a sword of steel, but with a sword of spirit." Suddenly, Kenji had an idea. It was a risky idea, but he had to try. He remembered the map, the location of the scroll. He knew what he had to do. While the soldiers were busy searching the village, Kenji slipped away, moving like the shadows his grandfather taught him. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, heading for the Whispering Falls. The journey was hard. The path was overgrown, and the ground was slippery from the recent rain. Kenji pushed through thorny bushes, his clothes tearing, small cuts appearing on his hands and face. He could hear the shouts of the soldiers in the distance, growing fainter. He had to be quick. He had to be brave. Finally, he reached the Whispering Falls. The water fell over the rocks like a white curtain, making a soft, rushing sound. He looked for the twin cherry trees. They stood tall and ancient, their branches intertwined, like old friends. Behind them, he saw the thick, green ivy. He pushed it aside, and there it was, a small, dark cave opening. Inside, it was cool and damp. Kenji's heart hammered. He squinted in the dim light, searching for the stone with 3 circles. He found it, tucked away in a corner, covered in moss. He pushed it with all his might. It was heavy, but it moved, revealing a dark hollow behind it. Reaching inside, Kenji felt a smooth, lacquered box. He pulled it out gently. It was beautifully made, dark wood with gold patterns. Inside, wrapped in soft silk, was the scroll. It was old, very old, the paper thin and yellowed. He held it in his hands. This was it, the lost scroll of Musashi, the secret to fighting without a sword. He didn't open it. He remembered his grandfather's warning. This power was not for him, not yet. He had to protect it. But how? He couldn't just carry it back to the village. Lord Kageyama would take it. He thought hard. What would Musashi do? What would his grandfather do? They would think of a way to win without fighting, without harm. An idea sparked in Kenji's mind. It was a crazy idea, but it was the only one he had. He knew the forest like the back of his hand. He knew every path, every hiding spot. He would lead Lord Kageyama away from the village. He would make them chase him. Kenji carefully re-hid the box in the cave. He would use a decoy. He took a piece of paper from his small bag and quickly scribbled some random symbols and drawings, making it look like an ancient text. He rolled it up tightly and tied it with a piece of string. This would be his bait. He ran back towards the village, moving carefully, trying to stay hidden. He crept close enough to see Lord Kageyama still demanding the scroll, threatening Hiroshi. The soldiers were still searching, getting more frustrated. This was his chance. Taking a deep breath, Kenji ran out from behind a house, holding the fake scroll high above his head. "Lord Kageyama," he shouted, his voice surprisingly loud and clear. "Here is your scroll, but you will never have its true power." Lord Kageyama's eyes, full of rage and greed, immediately fixed on Kenji. "Seize him," he roared, pointing his sword. "The boy has it. Do not let him escape." Several soldiers immediately broke away from the search and charged after Kenji. Kenji didn't wait. He turned and ran into the forest, not towards the cave, but in a different direction, a direction that would lead them deep into the tangled woods. He was small and fast, weaving through the trees, jumping over roots. The soldiers, big and heavy in their armor, struggled to keep up. He led them on a wild chase. He knew shortcuts, secret paths. He darted through thickets, forcing them to follow him into thorny bushes. He crossed a shallow stream, making them wet their heavy boots. He climbed a small, rocky hill, knowing the soldiers would find it hard to ascend in their heavy gear. He used everything his grandfather had taught him about moving silently and wisely in the forest. The sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery orange and purple. The forest grew darker, shadows stretching long and eerie. The soldiers were getting tired, their shouts turning into grunts of frustration. Kenji could hear them panting, complaining, but they were still chasing him. Lord Kageyama wanted that scroll badly. Kenji kept running, his own legs aching, his lungs burning. He knew he couldn't keep this up forever. He needed a final trick. He reached a part of the forest he knew well, a place where the trees grew very close together, their branches forming a dark, tangled roof. Below, the ground was uneven, full of hidden holes and slippery roots. He used this to his advantage. He ducked under a low branch, then quickly swerved to the left, disappearing behind a huge, moss-covered rock. The soldiers, charging blindly, went straight past, crashing into the thick undergrowth. Kenji waited, holding his breath. He heard their confused shouts, their angry curses. They had lost him. Slowly, carefully, Kenji crept away, heading back towards the village. He was exhausted, his body tired, but his heart felt strong. He had done it. He had led them away. But would they give up? He doubted it. Lord Kageyama was not one to quit easily. When Kenji finally limped back to the village, the moon was high in the sky. The soldiers were gone. The village was quiet, but tense. He found his grandfather sitting by a small fire, surrounded by other villagers. Their faces were full of relief when they saw him. Kenji, Hiroshi exclaimed, rushing to hug him. You are safe. You were so brave, my boy. Kenji, tired but proud, explained how he had tricked the soldiers with a fake scroll. The villagers murmured in amazement. They will be back, Hiroshi said, his gaze serious. They will realize the scroll was fake. But you have bought us time, precious time. He looked at Kenji, a deep understanding in his eyes. You used Musashi's true teaching today, Kenji. You fought not with a sword, but with your mind, with your courage, with your spirit. The villagers knew they couldn't fight an army. They decided they had to leave, to find a new home, to keep the secret of the scroll safe. They packed what they could, their hearts heavy with sadness but also hope. Kenji felt sad to leave his home, but he also felt ready for the journey. He was a guardian now, truly. Early the next morning, under the pale light of dawn, the villagers quietly left, moving into the deeper parts of the mountains, following paths only known to them. Kenji walked beside his grandfather, carrying a small pack. He knew the real scroll was still safe in the cave. He would return for it when it was truly safe. Lord Kageyama, furious that he had been tricked by a boy, sent his soldiers to search the entire forest, but they found nothing. He never found the true scroll. He never understood the true meaning of Musashi's teachings. He continued to fight with steel, and in the end, his greed and his wars led to his downfall. He never achieved the lasting power he craved. Many years passed. Kenji grew into a wise young man. He never forgot the scroll, or his promise. He continued to learn from his grandfather, absorbing all the knowledge of Bushido, the visible and the invisible parts. He learned to see the interconnectedness of all things, to understand the flow of life and human nature. He became a leader in their new, secret village, a place hidden deep in the mountains where peace truly reigned. One day, when Kenji was older, his grandfather, Hiroshi, felt his time was coming to an end. He called Kenji to his side. My time is near, Kenji, he whispered, his voice soft like a fading breeze. You have honored your promise. You have kept the scroll safe, not just the paper, but its spirit. Now, the time has come for you to decide its future. Kenji nodded, tears in his eyes. He had known this day would come. He had grown up with the weight of this secret, and the responsibility of the scroll. Grandfather, what do you wish me to do with it? He asked. Hiroshi smiled. The greatest secret of the scroll, Kenji, is not in its words, but in the understanding it brings. Musashi taught that true strength comes from within, from wisdom, and from peace. The scroll itself is a symbol. Its power is not in the ink on the paper, but in the hearts of those who truly understand Bushido. You have lived that understanding. Kenji spent many days thinking. He hiked back to the Whispering Falls, to the hidden cave. He retrieved the lacquered box, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. He opened it and carefully unrolled the ancient parchment. The writings were beautiful, flowing characters, almost like drawings. He couldn't read all the old words, but he felt the meaning. It was about balance, about seeing the whole picture, about respect for all life, about finding strength in kindness, not just in force. He realized his grandfather was right. The true secret was not just in the words. It was in how he had grown, how he had understood the world-unknown facts about the French Revolution. Imagine a time, long, long ago, in a land of fancy castles and hungry people. The year is 1789, a time of big wigs, sparkling jewels, and a king who loved his cake a little too much. But beneath all the glitter, a storm was brewing, a secret history waiting to be told. Secrets hidden deeper than the king's treasure vault. This isn't just a story from your history book. This is the real, wild, and sometimes very strange truth of the French Revolution. Things they might not have told you in school. Picture Paris, not like the pretty city we know today, but a place buzzing with noise and smell. Narrow, dirty streets wound like snakes, filled with people. Most people were very, very poor. They wore ripped clothes, and their tummies rumbled from hunger. They watched the rich folks in their fancy carriages with eyes full of anger. These rich folks, they had too much food, too much land, too much power. And the common people had almost nothing. This huge gap between the rich and the poor was like a crack growing wider and wider in the ground, ready to swallow everything. Our story really begins with a whisper. A tiny secret passed from one person to another in the dark corners of the city. Everyone knows about the Bastille, the big scary prison that got stormed. But did you know a tiny group of brave women actually helped kickstart that whole explosion? They were called the Poissards, which means fishwives. These weren't delicate ladies. They were tough, strong women who sold fish in the markets. They knew how to shout, how to fight, and how to get things done. It was October 1789. The people were starving. Bread was super expensive, a loaf costing almost a day's pay. Imagine not being able to feed your family. The king, Louis XVI, and his queen, Marie Antoinette, lived in luxury at the Palace of Versailles, far away from the hungry streets of Paris. They probably didn't even know what a hungry tummy felt like. This made the people very, very angry. One morning, a young woman named Louise, a fishwife with strong arms and a sharp tongue, stood at her market stall. Her basket was almost empty. "No bread, not even a crumb for my little brother," she cried out. Her voice was loud and clear, ringing through the market. Other women, their faces tired and worried, nodded in agreement. They shared their frustrations. They shared their fear. Suddenly, a crazy idea sparked in Louise's mind. "They live in luxury while we starve," she yelled. "Let's go to Versailles. Let's tell the king ourselves." At first, people looked shocked. Go all the way to Versailles? That was a long walk, and very dangerous. But Louise was not afraid. She grabbed a drum. Boom boom boom. The sound echoed. More women joined her. They picked up sticks, kitchen knives, and anything they could find. Thousands of women, not just fishwives, but mothers, sisters, and grandmothers, started marching. Their numbers grew like a giant snowball rolling downhill. They walked for hours, their tired feet hitting the dusty road. Their angry voices rose into a roar. To Versailles, to the king. This wasn't just a march. It was a human wave, a powerful force of desperate people. They reached the grand gates of Versailles, a place of incredible beauty, built with shiny gold and marble. It looked like a dream, but inside, the king and queen were living a nightmare, cut off from their people. The women stormed the palace, pushing past the fancy guards. They wanted bread, they wanted answers, and they wanted the king to come back to Paris, to see their suffering with his own eyes. This event, often called the Women's March on Versailles, was a huge, huge deal. It showed the king that the people were serious. It forced him and the queen to leave their beautiful palace and come to Paris, almost like prisoners. They had to live in the Tuileries Palace, right in the heart of the city, where they could no longer ignore the hungry faces outside their windows. This was a secret power move by ordinary women that changed everything. Now, let's talk about the famous prison, the Bastille. Everyone knows it was stormed, right? But here's a secret. When the people finally broke in, expecting to find hundreds of prisoners crying for freedom, what did they find? Only 7 prisoners. Yes, just 7. 4 of them were forgers, people who faked important papers. 2 were lunatics, which just meant they had mental health issues back then. And 1 was a noble who had been locked up by his family because he was, well, a bit wild. It wasn't about freeing tons of people. It was about something much bigger, a symbol. The Bastille stood for the king's unfair power. It was a giant, scary reminder that the king could lock anyone up without a good reason. By tearing it down, piece by piece, the people were tearing down the king's power, too. They didn't just want to free prisoners. They wanted to free themselves from an unfair system. People took pieces of the Bastille home as souvenirs, like people take small rocks from a famous landmark today. Some even used the stones to build bridges, like the famous Pont de la Concorde in Paris. Imagine walking on a bridge made from the bricks of a fallen prison. It was a powerful message. The old ways were literally being used to build new roads for the future. Now, you know about the guillotine, right? The big, scary machine that chopped off heads. It's famous for being a symbol of the French Revolution. But here's a funny, dark secret. The man who invented it, Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin, actually didn't want it to be a torture device. He wanted it to be a more humane way to execute people. Before the guillotine, executions were often long, painful, and messy. People were hanged, burned, or even pulled apart by horses. Dr. Guillotin thought his machine would make death quicker and less painful. He even suggested that his machine would make everyone equal in death. Rich or poor, noble or commoner, everyone would get the same fast, humane end. He thought it was a progressive, kind idea for its time. Can you believe it? He actually tried to make executions better. He probably didn't imagine it would become a symbol of terror. In fact, he was pretty sad about how his invention was used and how his name became famous for it. He didn't even want his family to have his last name anymore. But it was too late. Speaking of strange facts, did you know that during the revolution, people tried to change everything, even time itself? They hated anything that reminded them of the old king and the church. So, they decided to get rid of the old calendar. No more Sunday, no more saints' days. They made a new calendar with 10-day week. Imagine going to school for 9 days straight before getting 1 day off. The months were renamed too, with fancy nature names like Vendemiaire for harvest month and Thermidor for hot month. They even tried to change the clock, making a day into 10 hours instead of 24, with each hour having 100 minutes. It was all super confusing. Everyone struggled to tell the time and date. This shows how radical and extreme the changes were during this period. They wanted to start everything fresh, from scratch, even the very way people measured their lives. But, as you can guess, it didn't last very long. People found it too hard to use, and eventually, the old calendar came back. Let's dive deeper into the king and queen. Louis XVI wasn't a mean king. Not like a cartoon villain. He was actually quite shy and loved to fix clocks. He was a locksmith, a hobbyist who enjoyed working with his hands. It's a strange thought, the King of France, who ruled millions, spending his time tinkering with gears and springs. He was not prepared to be king and was very clumsy at making big decisions. He loved food, hunting, and his quiet hobbies more than ruling. This was part of the problem. He wasn't strong enough to lead a country in such a troubled time. And Marie Antoinette, the queen? Everyone knows the famous line, "Let them eat cake," when told the poor had no bread. But here's a little secret. She probably never said it. Historians say the line was probably made up by people who hated her, trying to make her look even worse. She was known for her extravagant fashion, her big, tall hairstyles, and her love for parties. But the cake quote was likely a piece of clever, mean gossip, spread like wildfire. She was also a foreigner, from Austria, and many French people didn't trust her. They called her Madame Deficit because she spent so much money. She had a little farm at Versailles where she pretended to be a milkmaid. Imagine the Queen of France, dressed in silk, playing farmer. It was her escape from the strict rules of court, but it made her seem even more out of touch with the real suffering of the people. This little farm, called the Hameau de la Reine, was like a fantasy world, far removed from the dirt and hunger of Paris. The royal family eventually tried to escape. This is a thrilling, movie-like part of the story. On a dark night in June 1791, the king, queen, and their children dressed up as ordinary people. The king even wore a wig. They sneaked out of the Tuileries Palace in a big, fancy carriage, hoping to reach the border and get help from other countries. They thought they were being very clever, but they made a big mistake. The king was recognized by a postmaster named Drouet in a small town called Varennes. How? Because his face was on the money. Imagine if your president's face was on all the coins and bills, and then they tried to sneak away disguised as an ordinary person. It would be impossible not to recognize them. This little detail, the king's face on the money, was a tiny, easily missed fact that brought down their whole escape plan. The family was arrested and dragged back to Paris, like criminals. This failed escape was a huge turning point. It showed the people that the king didn't care about France. He just wanted to save himself. It shattered any remaining trust people had in him. From that moment on, many people in France stopped wanting a king altogether. They started thinking about a republic, a country ruled by the people, not by a king. Then came the Reign of Terror. A very scary time. Everyone was afraid. If you said something bad about the revolution, or even if someone just thought you were against it, you could be arrested and sent to the guillotine. Thousands of people, rich and poor, were executed. It was a time of extreme paranoia, where neighbors suspected neighbors, and even friends turned on each other. A man named Maximilien Robespierre was the leader of this scary period. He believed that France needed to be purified of all enemies. He was a very powerful speaker and once a hero to the people, but he became more and more extreme. He thought he was doing what was right for the country, but his methods were brutal. He was always dressed very neatly, almost like a school teacher, but he was feared by everyone. Here's a less-known fact about the Reign of Terror. Some people called the victims martyrs of the guillotine. There were even special places, like the Picpus Cemetery, where many of the victims were buried in mass graves. Imagine a field filled with the bodies of those who died during this terrifying time. It's a silent, hidden testament to the horrors. The fear was so deep that people rarely talked about it openly for years afterward. But even Robespierre, the man who sent so many to the guillotine, met the same end. The revolution, like a hungry monster, eventually turned on its own children. People became tired of the endless executions. They realized that no one was safe. So, in July 1794, Robespierre himself was arrested and executed by the guillotine. The very machine he used to purify France became his own undoing. This was the moment the reign of terror finally ended, almost as quickly as it had begun. After all the chaos and bloodshed, France was exhausted. The people wanted peace. They wanted stability. This is where a very famous general steps onto the stage, Napoleon Bonaparte. He wasn't noble, he wasn't French by birth, he was from Corsica, an island that had only recently become French, but he was incredibly smart and a brilliant military leader. He rose through the ranks of the army like a rocket. Here's an interesting secret about Napoleon. While the revolution was all about getting rid of kings and queens, Napoleon eventually made himself an emperor. He crowned himself, not letting the Pope do it, showing everyone that he was in charge. It was a strange twist of fate, a king-like figure returning after all the effort to get rid of one. He brought order and created many lasting changes in France, like a new law system that is still used today. But he also brought back some of the old ways. For example, he brought back slavery in French colonies, which the revolution had actually abolished. This is a very dark, often forgotten fact about Napoleon's rule. It shows that even great leaders can make terrible mistakes and that progress is not always a straight line forward. The French Revolution was a roller coaster of emotions, full of big ideas, brave people, and terrible mistakes. It changed France forever and even changed the world. It showed that ordinary people, even hungry fishwives, could stand up to powerful kings. It showed that ideas like freedom and equality were worth fighting for, even dying for. But it also showed how easily things could spin out of control, how a good idea could turn into a nightmare of terror. From the women marching on Versailles to the few prisoners in the Bastille, from Dr. Guillotin's humane machine to the king's face on a coin, these little, often forgotten facts paint a richer, stranger picture of one of the most important events in history. It was a time when everything was turned upside down, a time of grand dreams and stark realities, a time that continues to whisper its secrets to us even today. And now, you know some of those secrets too. The dark secrets of World War I. Imagine a world where the very ground beneath your feet could hide terrible truth. A time when whispers in the dark meant more than cannon fire, and the biggest enemy wasn't always on the other side of the trench. This is the real story of World War I, a war so vast, so cruel, that some secrets got buried deeper than the soldiers themselves. It was a cold, wet morning in the spring of 1917. Rain fell in endless sheets, turning the muddy roads of northern France into slick, brown rivers. Young Thomas Miller, barely 18 years old, shivered under his thin uniform. He clutched his rifle, its metal cold against his gloved hands. Thomas had arrived in France only a few weeks ago, a fresh face among tired, old eyes. His home in the quiet English countryside felt a million miles away. All around him, the war stretched on, a gray, endless monster. The smell of mud, stale cigarettes, and something metallic, like old blood, hung heavy in the air. He stood guard at a supply depot, a collection of rundown tents and makeshift shelters tucked behind a line of trees. Trucks rumbled past, their engines spitting thick, black smoke. Boxes and crates were stacked high, waiting to be moved to the front lines. Thomas stared at the fog that clung to the distant fields, hiding whatever horrors lay beyond. He thought about his mom, baking bread in their warm kitchen. It felt like a dream now. Suddenly, a loud crash ripped through the quiet morning. Thomas jumped, his heart pounding. One of the old wooden crates, being lifted by a crane, had slipped. It hit the ground with a splintering thud. Everyone stopped. A small crowd gathered. The crate had burst open, spilling its contents onto the muddy ground. Thomas strained his neck to see. It wasn't ammunition or medical supplies. It was a jumble of old books, strange maps, and what looked like broken scientific tools. An officer, a stern man with a thick mustache named Captain Davies, pushed through the crowd. He looked angry, his face red. "What in blazes is this?" he boomed, his voice cutting through the rain. He knelt, picking up a leather-bound journal. Its pages were old and yellowed. He flipped through it quickly, his eyes darting across the strange symbols and drawings. A frown deepened on his face. Thomas watched, curious. Most crates held simple things everyone understood. This was different. Another soldier, Private Jenkins, a lanky man with a nervous twitch, also looked at the spilled items. "Looks like someone's old school project, sir," Jenkins mumbled, trying to make a joke. But Captain Davies didn't laugh. He looked worried, his gaze fixed on a small, dark wooden box that had also fallen from the broken crate. The captain carefully picked up the box. It had strange carvings on its lid, swirls and lines that Thomas had never seen before. The captain tried to open it, but it seemed locked tight. He shook it gently. Something inside rattled. He ordered the other soldiers to quickly repack everything, making sure no one touched the strange items too much. Move it, he barked, his usual calm gone. He then tucked the small wooden box under his arm and walked away quickly, not saying another word. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling. It was just a broken crate, but something about the captain's reaction, the strange contents, and that mysterious box, felt wrong. It was like a tiny crack in the perfectly ordered world of the war, letting in a peek at something hidden. The rain kept falling, washing away the mud, but not the questions in Thomas's mind. Days turned into weeks. The war churned on. Thomas saw horrors he wished he could forget, but the image of the strange box and the captain's hurried actions stayed with him. He was moved to a new trench line, closer to the front. The shelling was constant there, a thunderous roar that never truly stopped. Sleep was a luxury, a brief escape from the living nightmare. One night, during a rare lull in the fighting, Thomas was assigned to patrol the supply tunnels beneath the trench. These tunnels were dark, damp, and smelled of earth and fear. They wound like a giant worm through the ground, connecting different parts of the front. Thomas held his lantern high, its dim light dancing on the rough-hewn walls. Rats scurried away from his path. As he walked, he noticed a faint light coming from a small side tunnel, one he had never seen before. It wasn't on any of the maps he'd been shown. His heart beat a little faster. Following orders, he should report any unmapped areas. But his curiosity, sparked by that broken crate, pulled him forward. He crept silently, his boots squishing in the wet earth. The light grew stronger. It flickered, like a candle or a very old lamp. He peeked around the corner. In a small, hidden chamber, sat Captain Davies. The captain wasn't alone. Another man, older, with spectacles perched on his nose, sat across from him. This man wore civilian clothes, which was highly unusual so close to the front. On a rough wooden table between them lay that same dark, carved wooden box. It was open now. A soft, eerie glow came from inside the box. It wasn't bright, but it had a strange, pulsing quality, like a very slow heartbeat. Thomas gasped softly, covering his mouth. No one heard him over the distant rumble of artillery. The captain and the old man were bent over the box, whispering in hushed tones. Thomas couldn't make out many words, but he heard ancient, power, and risk. The old man pointed to something inside the box. It was a dull, gray stone, about the size of a pigeon's egg. But it wasn't just any stone. It seemed to shimmer, very slightly, with that same soft, unnatural light. As the old man touched it, the glow intensified for a moment, then faded. Captain Davies looked worried, his brow furrowed deeply. "It's more unstable than we thought," the old man said, his voice a low rasp. "The energy surges are unpredictable." "This isn't a weapon, Captain. It's something else entirely." Captain Davies nodded slowly. "But what if we could control it? What if this could end the war?" he whispered back, his voice desperate. The old man shook his head. "Or what if it ends everything? The legends say this stone, the heart of the earth, connects to something vast, something beyond our understanding. It can reshape reality, but it demands a terrible price." Thomas's blood ran cold. Reshape reality? This was not just a war anymore. This was something out of old stories, something magical and terrifying. He realized then that the dark secrets of the war were not just about spies or hidden battle plans. They were about things that pushed the very limits of what people believed possible. He had to know more. He had to understand what they were doing. He stayed hidden for a long time, watching, listening. They talked about strange scientific theories, about magnetic fields and energy transference, words that made little sense to Thomas's simple mind. But the fear in their voices was clear. They were playing with something dangerous, something they barely understood. Eventually, the old man packed the stone back into the box, and they both left, sealing the hidden tunnel behind them with a cleverly disguised stone slab. Thomas waited until he was sure they were gone. Then, he crept out. He touched the stone slab. It was warm to the touch, almost pulsing with a faint heat. He tried to move it, but it was too heavy, too well hidden. He knew he couldn't tell anyone what he saw. Who would believe him? A glowing stone, reshaping reality? They would think the shelling had finally made him mad. From that night on, Thomas saw the war differently. Every rumble of a distant shell, every flash of light, held a new, sinister meaning. He wondered if the strange events of the war, the unexplainable weather changes, the sudden failures of equipment, the eerie quiet before a massive push, were somehow connected to that stone. Was this heart of the earth already changing things, even without them fully controlling it? He started looking for clues. He paid closer attention to the supply movements, to the whispered conversations of officers, to the strange drawings he sometimes saw in discarded papers. He learned that the old man was a scientist named Dr. Klaus, a quiet but brilliant mind who had been brought in by the military for special projects. Nobody knew exactly what these projects were. They were cloaked in secrecy, hidden away from the common soldiers. Thomas's own company was ordered to move again. They were headed towards a sector known for its deep, old mines, tunnels dug long ago for coal. These mines were now used to store supplies and sometimes to launch surprise attacks. The air in these mines was thick, heavy, and the darkness was absolute, swallowing the light from their lamps. As they worked, shoring up old timbers, Thomas felt a chill that wasn't just from the cold. He felt a presence, something ancient and watchful. One afternoon, while working alone in a particularly deep shaft, Thomas heard voices again. They were faint, muffled, but distinct. He recognized Captain Davies's voice. He quietly moved closer, hiding behind a stack of empty sandbags. He saw Captain Davies, Dr. Klaus, and 2 other soldiers, heavily armed, walking down a side tunnel he had never noticed. This tunnel was rougher, less used, and led deeper into the earth. He waited until they had passed, then cautiously followed. The air grew colder, and a faint, metallic smell filled his nose. The tunnel opened into a vast, cavern-like space. In the center, a huge digging operation was underway. Not for coal, but for something else. Dozens of soldiers worked silently, their picks and shovels scraping against rock. And there, in the very middle, was a strange, tall structure, like an enormous, ancient drilling rig, but made of dark, unfamiliar metals. The heart of the earth stone was mounted at the top of this rig. It glowed faintly, a steady, ominous pulse. Cables ran from it, deep into the earth, disappearing into a freshly dug hole. Dr. Klaus was directing the operation, his face grim but focused. Captain Davies stood beside him, looking anxious. "We're almost there, Captain," Dr. Klaus said, his voice echoing in the cavern. "The energy readings are spiking. It's responding to the core, drawing immense power." "And the side effect?" Captain Davies asked, his voice tight. "The tremors? The strange weather patterns reports from the North Sea?" Dr. Klaus sighed. "Unavoidable, I'm afraid. We are tapping into something primordial, Captain, something that wants to remain undisturbed. The earth itself is pushing back." Thomas watched, horrified. They weren't just trying to use the stone, they were trying to force it, to drill into the very heart of the planet to unleash its power. And the earth was fighting back. He remembered the old man's words, "It can reshape reality, but it demands a terrible price." What price were they willing to pay? What kind of world would be left if they succeeded, or, worse, if they failed? He had to do something. He didn't know what, but he couldn't just stand by. He started paying close attention to the guards, to the routine. He noticed the changing of the shifts, the times when the cavern was less heavily guarded. He also saw that Dr. Klaus had a small, locked metal box he always carried with him. Thomas suspected it contained critical documents, perhaps even the research on how to control, or disable, the stone. The days that followed were a blur of mud, exhaustion, and secret planning for Thomas. He kept his uniform dirty, his face grim, blending in with the other weary soldiers. But inside, his mind was racing. He knew the risk. If he was caught, he'd be shot as a spy or worse. But the thought of what Captain Davies and Dr. Klaus were doing, what they might unleash, was a far greater fear. He remembered his mom's garden, the smell of fresh earth, the quiet peace of his home. He couldn't let them destroy that. One night, under the cover of a fierce artillery barrage that shook the very ground, Thomas made his move. He knew the guards would be distracted, their attention drawn to the sounds of battle above. He slipped away from his post, moving through the dark tunnels like a ghost. He used his knowledge of the mine shafts, finding secret passages and forgotten routes that led him closer to the hidden cavern. The flickering lights of the drilling operation grew stronger as he approached. He reached the entrance to the cavern. The guards were there, but their eyes were mostly on the ceiling, listening to the war raging above. A new tremor shook the ground, scattering dust from the cavern roof. The stone rig creaked loudly. It was Thomas's chance. He moved swiftly, silently, using the shadows cast by the moving machinery. He knew he needed to get to Dr. Klaus's box, to find anything that could stop them. He saw Dr. Klaus, his face pale and sweating, shouting orders at the soldiers. The scientist was holding his metal box tightly. Thomas realized it wouldn't be easy to get it. He needed a distraction, something big. His eyes scanned the cavern. He saw an old, unstable support beam near a stack of empty fuel barrels. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. He waited for another strong tremor. When it hit, rocking the cavern violently, he acted. He ran towards the support beam, pulling at the ropes that held it in place. The beam groaned, then crashed down, hitting the stack of barrels. The barrels toppled, rolling with a loud clatter and crash. Dust exploded into the air, making it hard to see. What was that? Captain Davies yelled, pulling out his pistol. The guards turned, their rifles raised, confused by the sudden noise and the dust. Dr. Klaus, startled, dropped his metal box as he stumbled back. This was it. Thomas lunged. He scooped up the metal box from the dusty ground. He could feel its weight, its importance. He didn't stop to open it. He just ran, weaving through the chaos, dodging soldiers who were still trying to figure out what was happening. He sprinted towards the closest exit, the one he had planned. He heard shouts behind him, angry voices, and then a gunshot. A bullet whizzed past his ear, chipping stone from the wall. He didn't look back. He ran harder, faster than he ever had in his life. The dark tunnels seemed to stretch endlessly before him, but he kept going, the metal box clutched tight to his chest. Finally, he burst out into a smaller, forgotten tunnel that led far away from the main operations. He sank against a cold, damp wall, gasping for breath, his heart pounding like a drum. He was safe, for now, but he knew he couldn't stay here. He had to figure out what was in this box. With shaking hands, he examined the metal box. It was locked, but not with a key. It had a strange combination lock, with symbols instead of numbers. Thomas remembered something. He had seen Dr. Klaus fiddling with it once, unconsciously tracing patterns. He tried to recall the patterns, the shapes he had glimpsed. After several tense moments, he tried a sequence of swirls and lines that matched the carvings on the heart of the earth box. Click! The box sprang open. Inside, Thomas found not weapons or maps, but a collection of strange journals, scientific notes, and a single, detailed schematic diagram. This diagram showed the heart of the Earth stone, the massive drilling rig, and beneath it, a swirling vortex of energy. And next to it, in neat, precise handwriting, were notes about a resonance frequency and a feedback loop. He could barely understand the complex words, but one phrase stood out, written in bold, desperate letters. Warning, reaching critical resonance will tear the fabric of reality. Cataclysmic event inevitable. Thomas's stomach clenched. Cataclysmic event. It meant the end of everything. They were on the brink of destroying the world, all to win a war. He knew he didn't have much time. The tremors were growing more frequent. The distant glow from the cavern pulsed with dangerous intensity. He had to stop them. He looked through the notes, searching for anything that could help. He found a hastily scrawled page, almost hidden, that detailed a safety override sequence. It described a series of energy pulses, a way to disrupt the stone's connection to the Earth's core, to make it go dormant. But it would be dangerous, requiring someone to get very close to the stone itself. He took the notes, stuffing them into his uniform. He knew he couldn't face Captain Davies and Dr. Klaus alone. He needed help. But who could he trust? The army was focused on the enemy, not on stopping their own secret project. He thought of Private Jenkins, the nervous soldier from the depot. Jenkins was a talker, but he was also honest and a good man. Maybe Jenkins would believe him. He made his way back through the tunnels, moving carefully, always listening for patrols. He found Jenkins with their company, huddled in a trench during a break in the shelling, trying to light a damp cigarette. Jenkins looked even more tired than usual. Jenkins, Thomas whispered, pulling him aside. I need to show you something. Something important. Jenkins raised an eyebrow, looking weary. What is it, Thomas? Another tall tale from the tunnel? Thomas shook his head. No, it's about the captain and that strange box. It's real. It's going to destroy us all. He pulled out the notes, unfolding the diagram and the warning. Jenkins's eyes widened as he read the bold lettering. He looked at Thomas, then back at the notes, his face turning pale. Cataclysmic event, he whispered, his voice trembling. What in the blazes have they been doing? Thomas quickly explained what he had seen. The hidden cavern, the drilling rig, the glowing stone. He told Jenkins about Dr. Klaus's fears, about the Earth pushing back. Jenkins, for all his nervousness, was a soldier. He understood danger, and this was a danger far beyond any enemy trench. We have to stop them, Jenkins said, his voice surprisingly firm. But how? It's heavily guarded. And who will believe us? They'll say we're traitors. I found a way, Thomas said, showing him the safety override sequence. But someone has to get close to the stone, disrupt the energy flow. Jenkins stared at the diagram, at the glowing stone, at the warning. He looked out at the mud and the constant flashes of distant artillery. We can't just let them blow up the world, can we? He murmured. They hatched a plan. It was risky, almost suicidal. They would wait for the next major offensive. The next time the entire front erupted in chaos, that would be their best chance to slip through the heightened security around the cavern. They would use the distraction of war to stop something even more terrible than war itself. Days crawled by. The air grew heavier. The tremors became more violent, shaking the ground even when there was no shelling. Reports of strange phenomena grew more frequent, sudden, localized storms, flickering lights in the sky, animals behaving oddly. The other soldiers muttered about it, attributing it to the stress of war. But Thomas and Jenkins knew better. The heart of the Earth was reaching its critical point. Finally, the order came. A massive, coordinated push was planned. Artillery fire would begin at dawn, followed by a full-scale advance. This was their moment. Thomas and Jenkins moved with their company, but when the first barrages began, they peeled off, using the deafening noise and thick smoke as cover. They navigated the treacherous tunnels, the ground shuddering with each explosion above. They could hear the shouts of men, the screams of the wounded. It was a hellish journey. But their focus was on the hidden cavern, on the glowing stone. They reached the cavern entrance. The guards were few, most having been pulled to the front lines. The remaining ones were distracted, their faces pale with fear as the ground quaked around them. Thomas and Jenkins overwhelmed them quickly and silently, taking their weapons. Inside the cavern, the scene was one of desperate chaos. The massive drilling rig groaned and creaked. The heart of the earth stone pulsed with a blinding, terrifying light. Cables sparked, machinery shuddered. Dr. Klaus was frantically typing at a console, his face hidden. Tales from World War II. Imagine a world plunged into darkness, a time when brave people fought against a terrible evil. This was World War II, a war so big, so scary, that it touched almost every corner of the earth. But what if I told you that in the middle of all that chaos, among the thunder of bombs and the shouts of soldiers, there were secret stories, whispered tales that the history books forgot. Stories so amazing, so full of courage, that they waited hidden, like treasures buried deep underground. Our story begins in a quiet little village, tucked away in the green, rolling hills of France. The year is 1943. The sky above was often gray, not just from clouds, but from the heavy feeling that hung in the air. German soldiers, dressed in their sharp, dark uniforms, patrolled the streets, their heavy boots clunking on the cobblestones. It was a scary time for everyone, especially for a young girl named Elise. She was only 11 years old, with bright, curious eyes that saw everything, even the things grown-ups tried to hide. Her hair was the color of rich chocolate, usually tied back in two neat braids that bounced when she ran. Elise wasn't like other kids her age. She spent less time playing with dolls and more time listening. She listened to the hushed conversations of her grandmother, to the secret clicks and whistles of the resistance fighters who moved like shadows in the night. Her grandmother, Maman Sylvie, was a kind woman with a face full of wrinkles that told many stories. She ran the small village bakery, where the warm smell of fresh bread often tried to push away the cold fear that gripped their lives. Elise often helped Maman Sylvie in the bakery, dusting flour on the big wooden table or carefully placing loaves into the hot oven. It was during these quiet moments, when the rhythmic thud of dough being kneaded filled the air, that Elise would sometimes hear things. Little bits of whispers, like crumbs falling from a table, about secret messages, about brave people, about hope. One crisp autumn morning, the air was extra chilly. Elise was sweeping the bakery floor, making little swishy noises with the broom. Maman Sylvie was behind the counter, pretending to count coins, but her eyes kept darting towards the street. Suddenly, a new customer walked in. He wasn't like the usual German soldiers who came for bread. This man was older, with kind, tired eyes and a thick, wool coat that looked a bit too big for him. He spoke in French, but his words had a strange sound, an accent Elise couldn't quite place. He asked for a simple loaf of rye bread. Maman Sylvie served him with a small, knowing smile. As she wrapped the bread, her fingers brushed against his. In that quick moment, Elise saw something tiny and folded pass from Maman Sylvie's hand to the man's. It was so fast, like a magician's trick. The man nodded, paid, and left without another word. Elise's heart thumped a little faster. She knew her grandmother was part of the resistance, the secret group fighting against the Germans. But she had never seen her actually pass something. Maman Sylvie, Elise whispered, her voice barely a breath. What was that? Her grandmother turned, her smile fading a little. Just a recipe, sweet pea, she said, too quickly. An old family recipe for something delicious. But Elise knew it wasn't a recipe. Her grandmother's eyes held a sparkle that wasn't about bread. It was about secrets. It was about danger. Days turned into weeks. The village felt heavier, the German patrols more frequent. One afternoon, a group of soldiers stormed into the bakery. They were loud and rough, knocking over flour sacks and throwing bread onto the floor. Where is he? One of them growled, his voice like thunder. Elise froze, clutching the broom handle tight. Maman Sylvie stood tall, her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her. Who are you looking for, Captain? She asked, her voice steady, even though Elise could see a tiny tremble in her hands. The captain sneered. The old man. The one who talks too much. The one who buys your special bread. He kicked at a fallen loaf. Elise's mind raced. The man with the strange accent. The recipe. Fear squeezed her chest. They knew, or they suspected. The soldiers searched every corner, pushing aside bags of flour and peeking into the oven, but they found nothing. Finally, with grunts of frustration, they left, leaving the bakery a mess. Maman Sylvie sank onto a stool, her face pale. Elise rushed to her side. Are you okay, Maman Sylvie? She asked, her voice small. Her grandmother nodded slowly. We must be more careful, little one, she whispered. Much more careful. That night, Elise couldn't sleep. The image of the captain's angry face, the overturned bread, it all replayed in her mind. She thought about the little folded paper. What was on it? Why was it so important? The next morning, as she helped clean the bakery, she noticed something strange. A small, almost invisible mark on the underside of the big wooden kneading table. It looked like a tiny, carved star. She had never seen it before. She traced the star with her finger. It felt rough, old. Elise looked around. Maman Sylvie was in the back room, humming a quiet tune. Elise, driven by a growing curiosity, carefully pushed against the star. Nothing happened. She tried again, pushing harder, wiggling it. Suddenly, with a soft click, a tiny, thin drawer slid out from the side of the table. It was so small, so well hidden, that only someone looking very closely would ever find it. Inside the drawer, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, ornate wooden box. It wasn't very big, maybe the size of her hand. The wood was dark and smooth, with tiny carvings of vines and leaves. Elise's heart began to pound like a drum. This felt important. She gently opened the box. Inside, there was a single old-fashioned compass. It was made of brass, and its needle trembled slightly, pointing north. But beside the compass, there was something else. A piece of very old, brittle parchment, rolled up and tied with a thin, faded red ribbon. With trembling fingers, Elise untied the ribbon and unrolled the parchment. The paper was yellowed with age, and the writing on it was in a strange, flowing script. It wasn't French. It wasn't German. It looked like a map, but not of any place she knew. There were strange symbols, little drawings of stars and moons, and lines that swirled like rivers. At the very top, written in a clear, bold hand, were 2 words, the Nightingale's Path. Elise knew this was no ordinary map. This was a secret, a very old, very important secret. She quickly put everything back, sliding the tiny drawer shut, her mind buzzing. She couldn't tell Maman Sylvie just yet. She needed to understand it first. Over the next few days, Elise looked at the map in secret, trying to make sense of it. She recognized a few of the drawings, a church spire, a winding river, a cluster of trees that looked like the Black Forest, far to the east. The compass seemed to be connected to the lines on the map. As she turned the map, the compass needle seemed to guide her eye to certain points. One night, after everyone in the house was asleep, Elise crept out of bed. She carefully pulled out the map and compass. The moonlight streamed through her window, casting long shadows. She held the compass, turning the map until the compass needle pointed exactly where a little arrow on the map indicated. As she did, a tiny, almost invisible symbol on the map, a small, faint bird, seemed to glow for a split second, like a tiny star winking at her. It was so faint, she wondered if she had imagined it, but her heart told her no. This was real. The next morning, the village was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Elise felt a shiver of dread. As she helped Maman Sylvie prepare bread, they heard it, the loud, roaring sound of German trucks driving into the village square. More soldiers. This time, they didn't come to the bakery. They went straight to the house of Monsieur Dubois, the kindly old tailor who lived 2 doors down. He was one of the secret resistance contacts, Elise knew. Shouts, the sound of breaking glass. Then, silence. A cold, heavy silence. Maman Sylvie grasped Elise's hand. Her face was grim. "They are taking him, Elise," she whispered. He knew too much. Elise's eyes widened. She suddenly understood the danger. The map, the compass, the Nightingale's Path, it was all part of something incredibly important. If the Germans caught Maman Sylvie, or anyone else involved, it would be terrible. Later that day, a young man, barely older than a boy, snuck into the bakery. His name was Henri, and he worked with Maman Sylvie in the resistance. He had a worried look on his face. "Maman Sylvie," he whispered, "they know about the rout. Monsieur Dubois was captured. They tortured him. He might have told them everything." Henry's voice was tight with fear. The message about the special package, the one for England, it might be compromised. Elise listened, her mind putting pieces together. Special package, route, England. Could it be related to the Nightingale's Path? She felt a sudden, brave spark ignite inside her. She had to help. That night, Elise couldn't just sit and wait. She knew she had to show the map to Maman Sylvie, but she was scared. What if it made things worse? What if it put her grandmother in more danger? As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she heard a faint scratching sound from outside. It was a familiar sound, the secret signal of the resistance. 3 short scratches, then 2 long ones. Maman Sylvie was meeting someone. Elise crept to her window, peeking through the curtain. She saw her grandmother slip out the back door and vanish into the shadows. Elise knew she shouldn't follow, but her heart urged her on. She grabbed the little wooden box and carefully crept out after Maman Sylvie. The night air was cold, biting her cheek. She moved like a mouse, staying in the deepest shadows, hiding behind bushes and walls. Maman Sylvie met with Henri and 2 other resistance fighters in a small, abandoned barn on the edge of the village. Elise hid behind a stack of old hay bales, listening. The Germans are everywhere, Henri whispered, his voice shaky. They're searching every farmhouse, every cart. They're looking for the scientist. He's carrying the plans for the new radio jammer. If those plans fall into German hands, it could turn the tide of the war. We must get him to the coast, Maman Sylvie said, her voice firm. To the hidden boat. But the usual routes are watched. Every path is dangerous. There's only one way, one of the other men said, a grizzled old farmer named Jean. The old path. The Nightingale's path. But no one has used that in decades. It's too risky. Too forgotten. Elise's breath hit. The Nightingale's path. Her map. She had to show them. But how? She couldn't just jump out. She waited, heart pounding. We have to try, Maman Sylvie said, her voice full of determination. We have no choice. As the resistance group split up, planning to meet again at dawn, Elise quietly slipped back into the house. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, before the sun had even fully risen, Elise found Maman Sylvie in the bakery, kneading dough. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were still strong. Maman Sylvie, Elise began, her voice a little shaky, I found something. She pulled out the little wooden box and opened it, showing her grandmother the compass and the rolled-up parchment. It's a map of the Nightingale's path. Maman Sylvie gasped, her hand stopping mid-knead. She picked up the parchment, her eyes wide with surprise, then with a deep, knowing look. Where did you find this, Elise? She asked, her voice hushed. Elise explained about the tiny hidden drawer, about the star. Maman Sylvie listened, her face growing more and more serious. This map, she whispered, it belonged to my grandmother. She told me stories of it, but I never thought it was real. It's an ancient path, used by smugglers long ago to avoid soldiers and taxes. It weaves through forgotten trails, hidden caves, and secret waterways, all the way to the coast. But it's too old, Maman Sylvie continued. The paths are overgrown. We don't know where it truly leads anymore. I think I do, Elise said, her voice gaining strength. I've been looking at it. The compass shows the way. And there's a symbol, a bird, that sometimes glows. Maman Sylvie looked at Elise, truly looked at her, seeing not just a child, but someone with a brave heart and a sharp mind. Show me, little one, she said. Elise carefully unrolled the map on the big wooden table, placing the compass next to it. She explained how the compass needle, when aligned with certain markings, seemed to make the faint bird symbol flash. Maman Sylvie watched, her eyes following Elise every movement. A glimmer of hope, like a tiny candle flame, began to spark in her eyes. This could work, she breathed. This could be our chance. The decision was made. Elise would guide them. It was a crazy, dangerous plan, but with the Germans tightening their net, it was their only hope. That night, under the cover of darkness, Elise, Maman Sylvie, Henri, and Jean met at the edge of the village. With them was a frail-looking man with spectacles and a briefcase clutched tightly in his hand. This was Dr. Moreau, the scientist with the invaluable plans for the radio jammer. He looked terrified. Are you sure, Elise? Dr. Moreau whispered, his voice trembling. An old map? A child to guide us? Elise felt a knot of fear in her stomach, but she looked at the map, then at the trembling scientist. She straightened her shoulders. I will get us there, sir, she said, her voice clear. Their journey began. The first part of the path led them through a thick forest, where ancient trees loomed like silent giants. Elise held the map and compass, her small hand steady. She carefully followed the faded lines, using the compass to find the right direction. Every now and then, she would pause, tilting the map until the faint bird symbol shimmered, guiding her forward. It was like the map was alive, whispering its secrets only to her. The path was rough. They stumbled over roots, pushed through thorny bushes, and waded across cold, shallow streams. Dr. Moreau, unused to such hardship, struggled to keep up. Henri and Jean helped him, sometimes almost carrying him. Maman Sylvie stayed close to Elise, her presence a silent comfort. The darkness of the forest was broken only by the thin beam of Henry's flashlight, dancing on the trees, making shadows jump and twist. At one point, they heard the distant barking of dog. German patrol dog. Fear shot through the group. Hide, Jean whispered. They quickly dove into a thicket of bushes, holding their breath. Elise pressed herself against the cold earth, her heart hammering. She could hear the heavy boots of soldiers, the panting of the dogs, growing closer. They were just meters away. She closed her eyes, praying they wouldn't be found. The sounds faded, slowly, agonizingly, until only the rustling of leaves and the chirping of crickets remained. They had passed. They continued their journey, pushing onward through the night. As dawn approached, they reached a steep, rocky climb that looked impossible. Dr. Moreau looked like he was about to give up. I can't, he panted, collapsing onto a rock. I just can't. You must, doctor, Maman Sylvie said, her voice firm but kind. Think of what you carry. Think of all the lives your work will save. Elise looked at the map. There was a faint, dotted line leading up the rocky face. Next to it, a small drawing of a goat. There's a hidden path, she pointed. A small one, for goats. We can climb it. It was difficult, dangerous. But Elise, despite her young age, was nimble. She led the way, finding footholds and handholds that the map seemed to whisper to her. Slowly, one by one, they scaled the rocky slope, reaching the top as the sun began to paint the sky with soft pinks and oranges. From the top of the ridge, they could see for miles rolling hills, patches of forest, and in the far distance, a faint shimmer, the sea. Hope swelled in Elise's chest. They were making progress, but they also saw something else. In the valley below, a column of German vehicles moving slowly, methodically, searching. They were getting closer. They pressed on, using the daytime to rest in hidden spots, deep in the woods or in small, forgotten caves. Elise would pore over the map, carefully tracing the next steps, learning the secret language of the nightingale's path. The map seemed to guide them not just through the landscape, but through time itself, connecting them to the ancient smugglers and brave souls who had used this path before. One evening, as twilight settled, the path led them to a winding river. It was too wide and too fast to cross by foot. Despair began to set in. We're trapped, Henri whispered, his voice full of defeat. They'll find us here. Elise looked at the map. There was a drawing of a small, overturned boat near the river. She pointed. It says there should be a hidden ferry, she explained. A rope ferry, for 2 people at a time. They searched along the bank, pushing aside thick reeds and moss-covered rock. And there it was, a rusty, forgotten metal cable stretched across the river, disappearing into the darkness on the other side. Attached to it, half submerged in the water, was a small, flat wooden raft. It looked old and precarious, but it was their only way. It took them hours, slowly pulling themselves across the river, 2 by 2, in the rickety raft. Dr. Moreau went first, his briefcase held tight to his chest, his face pale with fear. Henri helped him, pulling the cable with all his strength. Then Jean and Maman Sylvie. Finally, it was Elise's turn. She looked back across the dark river, feeling the immensity of their journey. They were truly in the heart of a hidden world, guided by her old map. As they neared the coast, the landscape changed. The trees thinned out, replaced by windswept dunes and the salty smell of the sea. They could hear the distant roar of waves crashing against the shore. But the danger also increased. More patrols, more searchlights sweeping the sky. They had to be extra careful. The map led them to a deserted stretch of beach, nestled between 2 towering cliffs. Elise pointed to a small, almost invisible cave entrance, half hidden by overgrown bushes and seaweed-covered rock. The map says the boat is here, she whispered. Maman Sylvie nodded, her eyes scanning the area. This is it, the rendezvous point. They cautiously approached the cave. Inside, it was dark and damp, the air smelling of salt and old wood. And there, bobbing gently on the water inside the cave, was a small, sturdy fishing boat. It had a quiet engine, just waiting. Just as hope swelled in their hearts, they heard it, the crunch of boots on the sand outside. Halt, a voice boomed in German. A searchlight beam cut through the darkness, sweeping towards the cave entrance. They were found. Panic erupted. Dr. Moreau clutched the untold story of the Cold War espionage. The old city hummed, a low, nervous rumble under a sky the color of bruised plums. Rain slicked the cobblestone streets, making the gas lamps glow with a blurry, golden halo. This was Berlin in the heart of winter, 1961, a city split right down the middle, where every shadow held a secret and every whisper could cost a life. Our story begins not with generals or presidents, but with a quiet woman named Anya, whose hands, though small, held the weight of a nation's biggest secrets. Anya walked with her head down, her dark coat pulled tight against the biting wind. Her breath puffed out in small white clouds, disappearing almost as soon as it left her lips. She moved like a ghost through the crowded East Berlin market, past stalls filled with wilting vegetables and rough-spun clothes. Her eyes, however, missed nothing. They darted, quick and sharp, taking in every face, every movement, every shift in the air. She was looking for something, or someone, and the fear was a cold knot in her stomach, colder even than the winter air. She was just an ordinary librarian to the outside world, cataloging books in a dusty, quiet room. But by night, Anya was a shadow dancer, a whispered name in dark alleys, a courier of secrets between 2 worlds locked in a silent war. Tonight, her mission was simple, yet terrifyingly complex. She had to deliver a tiny, rolled-up film canister, no bigger than her thumb, hidden deep inside a hollowed-out book. This film held pictures of brand-new missile sites, hidden deep in the Soviet Union, pictures that could change the entire balance of power. Her contact was supposed to be a baker, a kind-faced man named Klaus, who always wore a flour-dusted apron. He was to give her a loaf of rye bread, warm from the oven, and in return, she would give him a book. A simple exchange, a picture of normal life in a city that was anything but normal. She found his bakery, the warm smell of rising dough a comforting blanket in the chilly air. But something was wrong. The lights were too dim, the window display empty. A shiver ran down her spine. She pushed open the heavy wooden door. A small bell tinkled above her head, but no one came to greet her. The smell of bread was faint, old. The silence was thick, heavy, like wet wool. Anya's heart began to beat a frantic drum against her ribs. She looked around the small, empty shop. Sacks of flour lay overturned, spilling white dust like snow on the wooden floor. A chair was tipped over. It looked like someone had left in a hurry, or had been taken. Her eyes scanned the room, trained to spot the smallest detail out of place. On the counter, half hidden by an empty bread basket, lay a single, small wooden bird. It was painted bright red, with tiny black eyes. Anya felt a jolt. This was their emergency signal. The bird, painted red, meant danger. Get out. Run. Anya's mind raced. Klaus was gone. The message was clear. She clutched the book tighter under her arm. The film was still with her. It was too dangerous to keep. It was too dangerous to lose. She had to get it to the next contact. But who was it? Klaus was her only link. Her mission had just gone from hard to nearly impossible. She backed slowly out of the bakery, her hand reaching for the cold metal of the door handle. Just as her fingers brushed it, a voice boomed from the back room, sharp and cold like cracking ice. Looking for something, Fräulein? Anya froze, every muscle in her body tense. She slowly turned. A tall, burly man stood in the doorway of the back room, his face hard, his eyes like tiny chips of glass. He wore a heavy, dark uniform. Stasi, the secret police. He held a large, rusty wrench in his hand, as if he'd just been fixing something, or breaking it. Just looking for a loaf of bread, Anya said, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to make it sound light and innocent. But her throat felt dry, like sandpaper. The man took a slow step forward. Klaus isn't here today. He had urgent business. His gaze dropped to the book under her arm, then slowly, deliberately, rose back to her face. He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was a predator's smile. Perhaps you'd like to wait for him? In the back room? Anya knew what happened in the back rooms of Stasi interrogation centers. She knew what urgent business meant for people like Klaus. Her mind screamed run. Her body, however, felt heavy, rooted to the spot by fear. But then, a flicker of courage, like a tiny spark, ignited inside her. She remembered the faces of the people she was protecting. The idea of freedom. No, thank you, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. I have other errands. She turned quickly, flung open the door, and burst out into the rainy street, not waiting for his answer. She heard his shout behind her, angry and loud, followed by the heavy thump of his boots. He was coming. Anya ran. She ran through the narrow, winding streets of East Berlin, past dim apartments and shuttered shops. The rain plastered her hair to her face, stinging her eyes. Her coat flapped behind her like a broken wing. She could hear the man's heavy footsteps getting closer, closer. He was faster than she thought. She darted down an alley, dark and smelling of damp earth and stale garbage. Her foot slipped on a patch of slick mud, and she nearly fell. She caught herself, pushing off a grimy brick wall, her heart hammering. The alley opened into a small, deserted square. A lone, flickering street lamp cast long, dancing shadows. There was nowhere to hide. Then she saw it. An old, rusting dumpster, overflowing with crates and cardboard. It was a risky move, but she had no choice. With a burst of desperate strength, she climbed into it, pulling the lid down just as she heard the man's furious cry as he emerged into the square. She held her breath, surrounded by the stench of decay and the cold dampness. She heard his heavy breathing, his frustrated curses as he stomped around the square, searching. He paused right next to the dumpster. Anya could hear the creak of his leather coat, the soft thump of his heavy boots on the wet ground, just inches from her head. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to become as small, as invisible as possible. The book, still clutched tightly, felt like a lead weight. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, his footsteps slowly receded. Anya waited, listening, counting her breath. When she finally lifted the lid, cautiously, the square was empty. Only the rain continued its soft, drumming rhythm. She climbed out, her clothes smelling awful, but she was free. For now, she was alone, with a vital secret and no way to deliver it. The film was burning a hole in her pocket, a dangerous burden. She needed a new plan, and fast. The Stasi would be looking for her now, everywhere. Her usual safe houses, her usual routes, they were all compromised. She had to think of something completely unexpected. Anya remembered a tiny, forgotten cafe near the train station, a place where old men played chess and drank weak coffee. It was run by an old woman named Frau Schmidt, who seemed to notice nothing and everything all at once. Frau Schmidt had a soft spot for stray cats and, rumor had it, for stray secrets too. It was a long shot, but it was her only shot. She began to walk, trying to blend in, trying to look like just another tired citizen heading home. She pulled her scarf up higher, hiding part of her face. She walked past the bombed-out shells of buildings, grim reminders of an older war, now silent witnesses to a new one. The air grew colder as night fully descended, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and inky black. The cafe was small and steamy, a welcome warmth after the chilling rain. The clinking of cups, the low murmur of voices, and the smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air. Frau Schmidt, a tiny woman with wispy gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, looked up from behind the counter, her eyes surprisingly sharp. She saw Anya. She saw the fear in Anya's eyes, even as Anya tried to hide it. Anya ordered a small cup of coffee, her voice barely a whisper. She sat at a corner table, pretending to read the hollowed-out book. Her hands, hidden under the table, trembled slightly. She took a sip of the bitter coffee, letting the warmth spread through her. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Every person who walked in, every person who glanced her way, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. After a few minutes, Frau Schmidt came to her table, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She refilled Anya's cup, her movements slow and deliberate. As she leaned in, her voice dropped to a barely audible murmur. "There is a new book at the library, child. An old tale about a brave knight and a lost key. Does that mean anything to you?" Anya's heart leaped. A new book at the library? That was code for a new contact, a new drop point. "Yes, Frau Schmidt," Anya replied, trying to sound calm. "I do enjoy old tales." "Good," the old woman said, giving her a small, knowing smile. "It's waiting for you, in the section on ancient history, under the letter G for Guardians." She straightened up, then moved off to serve another customer, leaving Anya alone with the new, thrilling piece of information. The library. It was a risky place, but it was also Anya's usual hunting ground, her disguise. The Stasi wouldn't expect her to return to the very place where she worked, not after what happened to Klaus. It was bold. It was crazy. It was perfect. She paid for her coffee and left the cafe, feeling a new sense of purpose. The rain had stopped, and the streetlights cast long, yellow paths on the wet pavement. She walked with more confidence now, her steps lighter. The library was only a few blocks away. The main library building was a grand, imposing structure, usually bustling with students and researchers. But at this late hour, it was mostly empty, the only sounds the soft creak of the floorboards and the rustle of turning pages. Anya knew the building like the back of her hand. She knew the secret passages, the dusty corners, the squeaky steps. She walked straight to the ancient history section, her heart thumping a steady rhythm. The shelves were tall and dark, filled with heavy, leather-bound books. She found the G section, her eyes scanning the titles. There it was, a book titled Guardians of the Golden City, an old, thick book with a faded blue cover. She pulled it from the shelf. It felt heavier than it should. Her fingers brushed against a small, loose flap at the spine. She opened it carefully. Inside, not a key, but a tiny, folded piece of paper. Her eyes quickly read the cramped handwriting. It was a new set of instructions, a new rendezvous point, a new contact. The instructions were clear. She was to go to the Bahnhof Zoo train station. A man would be waiting for her at the old clock tower. He would be wearing a red scarf and holding a copy of the Communist Manifesto in German. The exchange was to happen exactly at midnight, and then she was to cross to West Berlin. Tonight, crossing the border was the hardest part. The Berlin Wall, a stark line of concrete and barbed wire, had only gone up a few months ago. It had sliced the city in two, trapping thousands. Guards watched every inch, every shadow. But there were tunnels. There were secret passages. Anya knew about them. She just hadn't expected to use one herself. She quickly put the note back, replacing Guardians of the Golden City on the shelf. She walked out of the library, the hollowed-out book still under her arm, the precious film still hidden inside. The clock was ticking. She had only an hour before midnight. The Bahnhof Zoo station was a maze of echoing halls and deserted platforms at this hour. The few people left seemed to scurry like mice, eager to be home. The air was cold, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and something metallic. The old clock tower stood tall in the center of the main hall, its hands slowly ticking towards midnight. Anya walked towards it, her eyes scanning the sparse crowd. She saw him, a man standing by the base of the clock tower, his back to her. He was tall, dressed in a long, dark trench coat, and around his neck, a vibrant red scarf stood out against the dark fabric. In his hand, held loosely, was a worn copy of Das Kommunistische Manifest. Relief washed over Anya, so powerful it almost made her knees buckle. She was almost there. This was it. She walked slowly, trying to look casual, trying to control the tremor in her hands. As she got closer, the man turned. His face was shadowed by the brim of his hat, but she could see the glint of his spectacles. He looked older than she expected, with a kind, gentle face, almost like a professor. He met her gaze, and gave a small, almost invisible nod. Anya approached him, stopping a few feet away. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft. "Do you know if the bookstore is still open? I am looking for a first edition of Crime and Punishment." This was their code phrase, passed down from Klaus. The man smiled warmly. Ah, a connoisseur. Regrettably, the bookstore closed an hour ago. But I do happen to have a copy of Crime and Punishment myself, though it is not a first edition. Would you like to see it? He held out his hand, palm up, ready to receive the book she carried. Anya's heart hammered. She reached into her coat, pulling out the hollowed-out book. Her fingers, however, hesitated for a split second. A tiny, almost imperceptible detail caught her eye. The man's hands. They were clean, too clean. No smudges of ink, no calluses. Not the hands of a professor who spent his days with old books. More like the hands of a soldier. And then she noticed something else. The way his coat hung. It was too stiff, and a faint outline, barely visible, where a pistol might be holstered under his arm. This wasn't her contact. This was a trap. Another Stasi agent. They had caught Klaus, and they were using his contact network to find her. Anya's mind screamed. No, she had been so close to freedom. She knew this trick. The Stasi often sent lookalikes, using stolen code phrases. Her only true contact would have a deeper, more personal code. Klaus's favorite kind of bread, perhaps. Not just a book title. Actually, Anya said, pulling the book back slightly, her voice suddenly stronger. I've just remembered. I prefer a different edition. A very rare one. Do you happen to have a copy of The Little Prince with a blue ribbon bookmark? This was her countercode, a detail only Klaus, her true contact, would know. He had given her that book as a gift, with that specific bookmark, years ago. The man's smile faltered. His eyes, behind the spectacles, hardened. The gentle professor mask slipped, revealing a flash of something cold and dangerous. I'm afraid I don't, he said, his voice now flat, devoid of warmth. Perhaps you should reconsider, Fräulein. It's late, and you are holding something very important, aren't you? He took a step closer, his hand subtly moving towards his coat. Anya knew she had only seconds. She had walked right into their trap, but she had also seen it. Her training kicked in. She dropped the book, letting it fall with a loud thud onto the cold floor. The man's eyes, drawn by the sound, flickered down for a fraction of a second. That was all she needed. With a desperate burst of speed, Anya spun around, not towards the exit, but deeper into the station, towards the dark, deserted train tracks. She heard the man shout, a command, and then the sound of other heavy footsteps running towards her. More Stasi. They had been waiting. She ran down a dark stairwell, her feet clattering on the metal steps. The smell of oil and old iron filled her nose. She burst onto a platform, empty and cold, lit only by the distant, weak glow of a single bulb. A forgotten, ancient train, covered in dust, sat on a far track, its windows like dark, empty eyes. Anya didn't stop. She jumped down onto the tracks, ignoring the sharp pain as her ankle twisted. The gravel crunched under her thin shoes. She ran between the rails, her mind focused on one thing, escape. She knew the old tunnels, the abandoned service routes. Klaus had told her about them once, laughing about the rats that lived there. Now, she prayed those rats would be her only company. She could hear the shouts getting closer, the pounding of heavy boots on the platform above her. The Stasi were on her trail, relentless. She ducked under a rusted old train car, squeezing through a narrow gap between the wheels and the concrete. The space was tight, dark, and damp. She shuffled forward on her hands and knees, pushing herself deeper into the darkness. The air grew heavy with the smell of mildew and stagnant water. She knew she was heading towards the old sewer lines, a dangerous, disgusting path, but one that led under the wall, under the very heart of the city, to the west. She emerged from under the train and found a small, almost hidden opening in the wall, half covered by vines. It was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. This was it, the entrance to the forgotten network. She pulled herself through, tearing her coat and scraping her skin. The tunnel was pitch black, silent except for the drip, drip, drip of water and the frantic thumping of her own heart. She pulled out a tiny, waterproof flashlight from her pocket, a tool from her spy kit, and clicked it on. A weak beam of light cut through the inky blackness, revealing a narrow, muddy tunnel stretching endlessly before her. Rats scurried away from the light, their tiny eyes gleaming like red jewels. The air was thick and foul. Anya pushed forward, her injured ankle throbbing with every step. She moved slowly, carefully, her senses on high alert. Every rustle, every distant sound, sent a jolt of fear through her. She knew they would be looking for her, sending search parties into these forgotten depths. She thought about the film, still hidden in her hollowed-out book. She had dropped the book, hadn't she? Her blood ran cold. No, she hadn't dropped the real book. In her panic, she had quickly switched it. She had an identical, innocent book in her other hand, a copy of an old German fairy tale collection. The real book, with the film, was still with her, tucked safely inside her inner coat pocket. A small victory, a tiny spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes opening into larger, cavernous spaces, sometimes narrowing to barely a crawlspace. Anya pushed through, her body aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She imagined the Stasi above, searching, their furious voices echoing through the tunnels, but she heard nothing but the sounds of the deep earth and her own movements. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time lost all meaning in the dark. She thought of Klaus, of his kind smile, his flour-dusted hands. She hoped he was all right, though her heart told her a different story. She thought of her family, safe in the West, people she hadn't seen in years, people she protected with every dangerous step she took. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw it. A faint glimmer of light in the distance, a pale, milky glow. Hope surged through her, giving her new strength. West Berlin. She pushed herself harder, ignoring the pain, moving towards the light. The tunnel opened into a small, abandoned cellar, a forgotten part of a building that had been damaged in the war and